I was around 13 or 12 years old. I don't quite remember the date. I've always been a big, childish person, partly because of a car accident when I entered medium school that felt like it stopped my growth mentally. I barely had any friends because I was going through the whole weird looks bullying thing, and the only ones that were okay to hang out with me were younger people, or the people with the same mindset I had. Every year my parents would send me to a summer camp lost in the mountains where there were basically mountain activities like hiking, exploring forests, and all of that. For reference, I live in France, and I don't know how summer camps elsewhere work, but here it's basically an age classification. There were 3 groups: blue, youngers, yellow, medium, and green elder. I was supposed to go into the yellow group because I was still too young, but for some reason I got bored to the green group composed of people that were 16 or 17, and everyone hated me for being so young and childish. The day I remember was one of the last. The instructors that were keeping an eye on us brought us to the deepest spot of the forest to have a picnic. And after that, they looked after us and asked us if we wanted to play hide and seek. Everyone was probably too old for that, but they were still setting things up, to which most refused to even hide. I was a kid, of course, and was overexcited when they started counting, and I ran as fast as I could to a place super far away so they wouldn't find me. There was a smallish river. I jumped over it and after some steps felt a hand catching my hairs very violently. I tried to turn myself, but the hand just slipped to my neck and caught me hard. I was terrified and tried to fight back and to resist, but the hand that was restraining me was one of an overgrown man with a lot of strength. I started to scream at the top of my lungs, and I'd never screamed that loudly before. But seemingly no one heard me, and the guy began talking while dragging me into the forest. He was furious and kept repeating, "You'll see. I hurt you so much you're gonna cry and scream more." I remember him talking about harming me, raping me. I was just 13. I was so terrified. I've never lived any physical abuse, no hitting, nothing. That was more than words. He dragged me further into the forest and I kept screaming, hitting him until at some point I found a way to bite his hand with all the strength of my jaw. He screamed and backed away from the pain as his arm retracted. I escaped, turned back, and made the mad sprint of my life. I think the guy lost interest in me because he didn't run after me. I jumped back over the river and found my one only friend in the whole camp. I don't know if she saw what happened at all. And I went to the instructors, but was too terrified to do anything or even tell them, so I didn't. I didn't know who it was. I didn't know if it was someone from the camp or a total stranger. I didn't even see his head, his skin, the clothes he was wearing, nothing. I was just too scared. The same night I called my parents, but they couldn't come to collect me. I had to go back home on the bus like everyone else. What terrified me the most was that the guy could be one of the people in the same group as me. For all I know, he could just hit me in my sleep and take me somewhere. I still don't know who that guy is and never want to know. So to this stranger in the forest who wanted to rape a 13-year-old girl, let's not meet. This story takes place a little over a year ago, some weekday around midnight in central Ohio. I want to preface this by saying that I'm not particularly religious, nor do I necessarily believe in ghosts or the supernatural, but something weird happened that night that I cannot explain. This story is 100% true, except for a few details that have been changed for the sake of anonymity. Let's call it Wednesday. It was around 5 p.m. and a friend tells me about an abandoned building her friend showed her the day before and asks if I want to check it out sometime. Of course I do. But being the curious soul that I am, I wanted to go that night, whereas she could not. I asked a few other friends to make the journey with me, and all declined either because they weren't into the whole breaking and entering and trespassing thing, or they were otherwise busy. So I decided to go alone. This isn't something I usually do, as I have a few close friends who are just as experienced as I in the urbex scene, and the three of us make an excellent team when it comes to stuff like this. I've gone to places alone before, but never with this little research done on the area. I couldn't find anything on the internet about the place, so I decided to say screw it and go, as I'm not one to back down from an opportunity like this. So I grabbed my bag, flashlight, camera, and I'm on my way. I tell someone exactly where I'll be in case something happens and to call the police if I stop responding for a few hours. I arrive about a mile from the location and start my journey. Most of it is woods and creeks, but the last bit of it is a dilapidated parking lot. I get to the lot and see not one but 2 buildings to explore. This is turning out to be better than I expected. I choose to go into the building on the left, as it looks more easily accessible, and I start looking for a way in. Around the back, I find some metal stairs that have been overgrown and look like they're close to collapsing, and decide to take my chances and slowly climb them, keeping my eyes on each step to make sure I'm not going to fall through anything. I climb the stairs just fine and go to the 2nd floor. The door is closed, but with a minimal amount of force opens just fine. No padlock or anything. And just like that, I'm in. I look around with my flashlight. This place is in better shape than a lot of abandoned buildings around my location. Part of the roof had been caved in from a falling tree, but everything else looked good. I walk around the entrance room a bit more and realize where I am. There are note cards all over the floor with basic information on people. First and last names, addresses, date of births, diagnosis codes, and inpatient or outpatient with a check next to it. I am in a psychiatrist's office. Nice. I love these kind of places, and insane asylums are some of my favorites to explore. I have a seat and look through some of the patient cards. I look up diagnosis codes and try and get a profile of the person. For no particular reason, just interesting stuff. After a bit of this, I stand up to continue my journey. Now the way this building is set up is basically a giant letter I, with the entrance stairs I used at the bottom, and a boarded up main entrance in the center. The only set of stairs to the 1st floor are at the top of the eye. I look around some of the 2nd floor rooms and don't really see much, mostly empty offices with a chair or lamp in the room. I do, however, find a room that I assume was for children to play in, while their parents were seeing a psychiatrist. It has a sandbox and some toys lying around, but I noticed that someone had taken their time to use the sand to draw a pentagram on the floor, and I chuckled. After seeing everything I needed to on the 2nd floor, I go down to the 1st. The stairs are steep and winding, but very sturdy, and I check the door to make sure it won't lock behind me and make my way down. The 1st floor is basically just a long hallway with rooms along one side and a reception area on the other. I start checking out the rooms on the right side, and after a few interesting rooms, break room, kitchen, storage closet with Christmas stuff inside, I come across this office with something interesting on the desk. Before getting to that, I want to pose a question. Why does every abandoned building have Christmas stuff in it? Like seriously, 90% of the buildings I've been to have fake trees, wreaths, garlands, or something like that. What gives? Anyway, back to the show. So, on the desk in this office is a set of post-it notes. On these notes are messages that make me feel a little uneasy, and they go like this. He's planning on letting the hostage out, 4:30. Do we have staff accountability yet? 4:35. Can Officer John escort Jane out the room? 4:42. This is where things got weird, and I snapped a picture and took them on my phone so that I could send them to my friends. As soon as I take the picture on my phone, the entire building begins to shake violently. My first thought was, earthquake. Now, I'm not speaking from experience, but I have to assume an old, dilapidated building is not the type of place you want to be in during an earthquake, so I start to make my way out, only this time rather briskly. As I get upstairs, I notice the door I propped open to keep from locking me out was now only slightly ajar. The small piece of metal I propped it open with was nowhere to be seen, although I didn't look very hard. As I'm walking/jogging my way out through this gyrating building, I noticed that every door I had opened upstairs was now closed tight. What the hell, was someone messing with me? I didn't want to stick around and find out. As I was leaving the larger room I entered through, I noticed the door I came in was shut. I pulled on it, but nothing. The door wouldn't open. Now I'm pretty calm under pressure, but this one was beginning to be too much. I was starting to freak out a bit, and I made the quick decision to force my way out. Typically, I hate doing any damage to a building I'm exploring and usually try to avoid it wherever possible. But this was a special case. I wanted to get the hell out of there. Kick the door down? I've done it before, but this door didn't seem like it was going anywhere. It opens the other way and was very sturdy. Guess I'm kicking out the press board covering the window next to it. Luckily, these windows were huge and low enough where I could get a foot on the wood. 2 kicks and the wood gives out. The building is still shaking, and I make a hasty getaway down the stairs. This is the part that still spooks me. As soon as my feet hit the ground on the last step, the building stopped shaking. Completely. Everything around me was silent. I must have been going crazy. I know what I felt, I know what I saw. I got out of there and didn't look back. A few weeks later, my crew freed up and wanted me to show them the place even after I told them the story. Oddly enough, every other time I've been there, nothing out of the ordinary has happened. I'm not sure what happened nor why, and I'm not one to believe it was a ghost or anything. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't shake me up. Was it just a well-timed earthquake? Possibly. But I heard nothing about it on the news the next day, and nobody else said they felt or heard anything. Any insight, whether it be spiritual, geographic, or anything related, would be wonderful and appreciated. Also, final note, I tried to go back to the building a few months ago, as a colleague and I now dabble in paranormal investigations, and the buildings from these stories were now demolished, both of them. It's quite sad to see them go, but I still can't find a trace of them online. It seems like this was all done rather quickly and under the radar. This happened to me when I was 15. My dad ran a wrecker service for over-the-road truckers. Late one night we got a call that a truck had run off the road and struck a tree 20 miles south of town. So my dad and I fired up the wrecker and headed south. When we came onto the scene, the truck and the trailer had run off the road to the right and smacked a tree head-on. It was one of those 100-year-old oak trees. This was back in the day when there was a cab over semi-trucks, or one of those without noses, or the engine is under the cab. The truck was still running, at an idle. The door was closed, but no driver was seen from the driver's window. The front driver's windshield was busted, and there was a large hole in the middle. The trailer was loaded with flat, quarter-inch steel sheets. Of course, it's pitch black, and we couldn't really see things that well when we first got there. Our impression was that the driver smacked a tree, hit his head on the windshield, and was already getting treatment somewhere else. So my dad set up the wrecker to the hook on the trailer, and he wanted me to open the cab in order to release the brakes. When I opened the door, I was greeted with the sight of the lower half of a body. When the driver hit the tree, a single sheet of steel broke free and cut through the cab, cutting the driver in half. The upper half of his body went through the windshield. I found the rest of him about 40 feet from the truck in a cornfield, and he was still grabbing the upper part of the steering wheel. It looked like he was frozen in time, still driving the truck. Needless to say, he went into a body bag with his lower half, and we worked through the night getting the truck and trailer back to town. This is one of my many experiences, having grown up in a wrecker service family. I work a long commute away from home and depend on the train. There were some issues that caused the trains to be cancelled for hours, which left me stranded about an hour and a half away from home. At the train station, there were a few others who were all heading to my city, and we decided to split a taxi. The people were woman one, Lisa, heading to my city to see a gig. She was a bit tipsy. A guy called Kyle traveling with Lisa. They're not dating, but their conversation seemed to make out that they were very good friends. He was beyond drunk, and it made me a bit uncomfortable because he was pissing in a bush and kept making vulgar comments about Lisa's hot cousin. Then this other dude, John. He was traveling alone and mentioned that he lived in my city, just moved there, but was in the town we were leaving from as he just broke up with his girlfriend and was picking up stuff from her place. And another woman who I'll talk about later. This other woman decided to stay at her mother's house in the town for another evening, so drops out of the taxi ride. That should have been my cue to also drop out, but they had just rung the taxi and I didn't want to ruin it, as they already calculated how much we each needed to pay. I decided to ask Lisa if she could sit next to me, and she said she understood completely, and said that she would sit in the middle. So the seating arrangement was drunk Kyle sat at the front, me on one side, Lisa in the middle, and John as well. Mind, from where we were parked there was no danger to getting in from the other side, as there were no oncoming cars. He opened the door on my side and just stared at me. Then Lisa says cheerfully for me to sit on the other side, as she wanted the middle seat to talk to Carl more easily. John stared at us for a second time, then scoffed and slowly walked over to the other side and got in. The ride itself was awkward, as Lisa and Kyle were both drunk and dirty laundry was aired. That's how I gathered that they were sleeping together. Lisa was drinking, still before she finally said she needed to go to the toilet and was desperate. The taxi man found a public leisure center for him to pull into. She got out and went inside. Mistake number 2. I should have gone with her. I just didn't think about it. Normally I go with female friends in restaurants or bars, but because it was in a taxi and freezing outside, I just stayed. Kyle and John went out to smoke a cigarette. Then John came back when he saw Lisa coming out. He scooted over to the middle and put his hand on my upper thigh and rested it there. Regret number 3. I should have said something and made a scene, but I just froze completely. Lisa opened the door, looked at John, looked at me, then looked at John's hand on my thigh, about 2 inches away from my lady parts. She cheerfully said to him, "Oh, I'm so sorry, can we switch places? I love sitting in the middle." John looked pissed. He looked over at me, who was still frozen, removed his hand from my thigh, and scooted out to make room for her. He grumbled something I couldn't hear before Lisa said, "Thank you," and came in next to me. John sat in his allocated seat this time and we took off. Lisa then took my hand and whispered, "Woman to woman, I'll make sure you get home safe." I was just tearing up and said thank you. Then throughout the journey, about 4 to 5 times after Lisa had leaned forward to speak to Kyle, John slipped his hand to her seat, so when she would sit back down he would touch her ass. Every time she just giggled and said, "Oh, sorry, I think I sat on your hand." I felt awful because she was in this position because of me, so I apologized and she just repeated that she'll get me home safely. She was very drunk at this point from the extra taxi drinking, so I think she just latched onto that mission. When we got close to the city center, Lisa asked me where I needed to get to, and I told her the general area. John said he moved into an area that is literally in the opposite direction. His suburb is north, and I'm south of the city center. He said after Kyle and Lisa got out that we would share a taxi, despite that making no sense, as we lived in completely different directions from each other. I said, "No, that's fine," but he was insistent and wouldn't take no for an answer. Lisa was too drunk and crying about how much she loves her dog at this point to protect me, and I texted my husband that I was terrified and if he could walk up to come get me. My husband booked it over there as fast as he could, and after we got out the taxi, John was getting his bags out the trunk, and I said bye to Lisa and just ran as fast as I could to make it to my husband. We say it all the time, but it needs to be said again. Screw being polite when you feel scared. John probably latched onto me because I was traveling alone, or Lisa was with a man. Lisa is right. Girls need to stick together. I should have gone with her to the toilet. When I was 8 or 9, I had gone to our local Walmart with my grandpa to pick up groceries. While my grandpa was checking out, I asked him if I could go to the Subway attached to the Walmart to buy a sub, because I was hungry and didn't want to wait to eat at home. My grandpa, being the loving man he was, wanted me to be happy, so gave me some money and told me I could order myself while he finished paying for the groceries. The Subway entrance was maybe 20 feet from where my grandpa was standing in line, so he could easily see me the whole time I walked over to order. I also want to mention that we lived in a very small and relatively safe town. Scary things didn't happen to people, and this lulled my grandpa and I into a false sense of security, trusting that I would be safe walking 20 feet to the Subway alone. I don't blame my grandpa for anything. This was something that a lot of parents would allow their children to do. I quickly walked the short distance to Subway, thinking of all the stuff I was going to pile on top of my sub. I got up to the counter and noticed immediately that the only other people in the Subway were 3 middle-aged men talking. I ignored them first, not thinking anything could be wrong. After all, in my little kid brain, I had no reason to think strangers would be interested in me, even though my parents had given me stranger danger talks, which probably did end up helping me, or maybe even potentially saving my life. I ordered the sub with no problem and paid my money. The cashier was very uninterested in me, and looking back I could tell she didn't want to deal with a kid, so she quickly made my sub then disappeared into the back. I stood there alone for a moment collecting my change and safely tucking it away in my pocket. I didn't notice the men until all 3 of them were standing right behind me. When I turned around, they caught me off guard. They were all smiling at me in a creepy way, and I instantly felt dread in my stomach and became very uncomfortable. Finally, one of the men spoke up. and in a thick accent said, "You are very beautiful. What is your name?" This scared me because I knew older strange men should not be asking my name or commenting on how I looked. Something in me told me to lie, so I said, "My name's Ashley." Needless to say, this is not my real name, and the other two men were standing behind him and just creepily smiling and staring at me the whole time, not saying a word. The same man that spoke the first time said, "Ah, Ashley, what a beautiful name. Do you want to come with us and have some fun?" All my alarm bells were ringing in my little kid brain. I panicked and started desperately looking around for my grandpa. I noticed him, still standing at the checkout line, oblivious to what was happening. The man took a step towards me, and I did the only thing I could think of. I ran. I ran faster than I ever have before and straight to my grandpa and never looked behind me. So I don't know if the men tried to come after me or anything. Thankfully, I never saw them again. When I got to my grandpa, he was finishing up paying for the groceries, gave me a stern look for running through the store, as he probably thought I was just trying to be obnoxious. I suppose he didn't notice the men. I hurried my grandpa along, and we left the store safely and quickly. After we got home, I told my grandpa what happened. He was furious. He wanted to go back and report the men. I don't know if he ever did, but he wanted to beat the crap out of them. My grandpa was a big guy and strong for his age and probably could have taken them. So creepy middle-aged men who tried to get little girls to follow them. Let's not meet. When I started working my last job, it was for people who had assisted living homes, beautifully built to accommodate the elderly. Days before starting work at a newly built house, the company owner had me take some things over there one evening. It was autumn and growing dark earlier, with nighttime closing in pitch black, where there were no lighted areas. It was an area where new homes were being built near surrounding woods, with very few streetlights. Upon entering the new house, I went to find the place and was told to put the stuff down. I walked around admiring the beautiful new rooms and furniture, although something seemed off. I knew that I was fortunate to be getting the full-time position on my preferred shift, working in this beautiful new house. Although I was satisfied, something in the atmosphere seemed very off. It wasn't the expectant feeling of being a bit nervous, working with different people, with most of whom I'd never met, or the feeling of emptiness of a place or property having been never occupied. The entire area where the homes were being built just felt off. Business at the new house began as it slowly filled with residents and more than enough work for one or two of them alone. Strange vibes from the house still were going strong. It wasn't until several months later the workers began to mention strange experiences they had. This didn't happen until some residents had passed away in the home, but I did not consider that as being the reason for the strange events. Not entirely, anyway. The first weird thing that I heard was that a co-worker was telling me that she felt as though she was being smothered as she sat near a resident's bedside working the midnight shift. I will always remember the time that I was taking a break and making popcorn in the microwave. Some had burned. Fearing it would smell of the house, I took it to the garage that was conveniently attached to it. When I came back inside the house, the entire kitchen reeked with the scent of air freshener. There were plug-in air fresheners in other rooms of the house, but none in the kitchen at the time. The strong scent I was smelling was nothing like the other air fresheners, and they were not even the type that have the automatic sprays. I checked all over the house for any air freshener spray cans or cleaners that may have been a cause for the scent, but found nothing. All cleaners were in the garage, and the residents were all sitting quietly in the living room. Some incidents that were told to me were from two co-workers that experienced lights turning on and off without them touching them. One worker said that she had turned out the main light in the living room because it was bothering a resident's eye. After helping all of the residents to bed that night, she came back up from the hall only to find it was turned back on. She thought someone was in the house. A worker on the midnight shift mentioned that she had the lights on in the main part of the house. She had gone into another area of the house, and when coming back out, she found the lights out and very dark. One evening after my shift, I was talking to one of my good co-workers over the phone as she was working at the house. She told me that she had heard something in the hall area near some of the bedrooms. To her surprise, she found one of the Christmas ornaments that hung on a doorknob moving all on its own. It was repeatedly lifting out and hitting the door in a quick, timely manner, creating continual knocking. The ornament was very light, made of felt in Christmas colors with small bells lined down the middle and front. There was also a small brown felt Christmas tree on the bottom of the front. All of the bedroom doors had one of these kind of ornaments hanging from the outer doorknobs to decorate for Christmas. What creeped me out was the methodical, rhythmic way it was knocking, as if something was saying hello. She took a video on it on her phone, and I asked her what she thought about it. She said she didn't know what to think. She wasn't one to believe in ghosts. I thought that maybe she was trying to play a funny prank on me. I tried to use a fan to blow the ornament and see if I could get it to move like it had been before. The fan just made it blow in all directions no matter what speed I set, or where the fan was placed. It seemed to me that if a string was used to make it move, the ornament could have been much heavier for a quick pull of gravity to make that precise knocking. Some months later, a new employee started working the midnight shift and was doing room checks. When approaching the door that once had the moving Christmas ornament, she heard the little elderly resident inside speaking with someone that sounded like another elderly lady. This was when all the other residents were soundly sleeping in their own rooms. Some nights later, I was told that the same resident came out of that room in hysterics one night, fearing that demons would harm her. I heard of this happening at least twice. This was entirely out of character for her. Demons were never something she'd speak of. Perhaps she was reacting to something in that room. Years later, the room became open for another occupant. Another little lady came to stay. When she was being assisted to her room for bedtime every night, she always stood in the doorway making the sign of the cross and would say, "Bless the room." This I know to be true. I had seen her do it. No one had told her the story of it. It was as though she knew that something wasn't quite right with it. One afternoon, a worker came in for her shift, and the company owner also came in around the same time, needing some help, taking some stuff down to the basement. I stayed over my shift to help. We braced the basement door, which was designed to swing shut and automatically lock. My co-worker bumped a tall, thick drinking glass off the kitchen counter. It hit the hard tile floor, sliding towards the open basement door, and down the stairs it went. I could hear it hitting every step before landing at the bottom. It was a tall stairwell, and I dreaded cleaning broken glass. I went to retrieve it, not seeing any broken glass on the steps. When I picked up the glass, I could find no breaks, cracks, or chips upon examining it, though. When I had been expecting to find it damaged in at least some way. There was also a kind of chaplain that would come to the house and tell inspirational stories to the residents. He would sing and play music to them and have them sing along. They loved him. I briefly mentioned to him about paranormal things happening around the house, and I asked him if he could bless the house, and he said a nice prayer. One day when I was at work, a frequent visitor called me over to her and shockingly told me that something had just whispered her name in her ear. Another day, when she was visiting, she mentioned feeling an oppressive, threatening feeling as she went through her mother's clothes in the closet. She said that she was going to bring in some holy water and bless the house. She and I were in agreement on never talking about anything we discussed about the house. One day not too long after, she brought in the holy water and we walked through the house in prayer. She marked each door in the sign of the cross with holy water, and the paranormal activity seemed to die away after that for a bit. One night a co-worker working the midnight shift was putting up Christmas decorations on the fireplace mantel. She took pictures with her phone camera of how it looked when she was done. A picture I had her send to my phone shows eerie bluish rays near the fireplace mantel by the ornaments and by the Christmas tree. She told me she had done a video in the room and it showed some really crazy stuff, but she deleted it. It was fun to kid co-workers and put out Christmas ornaments like that one moving on its own. So I don't know what it was with the Christmas decorations, but something seemed strangely attached to them. The house owner apparently bought many of them at different yard sales. I had also worked with two good co-workers, each in different years, who noticed the strange feeling from the house and surrounding area. We often wondered and talked about possible causes of it. The final creepy experience that I recall happened one afternoon when I stayed after my shift and was talking with a co-worker and a visitor in the kitchen. We were talking about some of the weird things about the house, and she was sharing some of her own paranormal experiences that had happened in her own life. Right in the middle of conversation, 3 loud, distinct knocks could be heard coming from a nearby bathroom that was in plain view. We all heard it. None of us recalled seeing anyone go in there, and residents would have needed assistance walking anyway. We opened the bathroom door to find it dark and empty. Make of these experiences what you will, but I guarantee you that they are all true. In Canada, we have a scout system similar to the US. Our system is by level: Beavers, Cubs, Scouts, and Venturers. This happened during Cubs. So there was this house on the property of camp. Beautiful house, nice wooden smell, it was great. During this time, all the troops around us gathered for a weekend up at the house, and there were maybe 6 or 7 troops gathered. We would be doing wooden car racing and stuff. The house was split into 2 rooms, one for males and one for females, and there was a closet door connected to each room. At the time, there were maybe 10 to 20 guys in one room, and maybe 10 to 15 females. We would all be sleeping on the floors with our sleeping bags. After brushing, me and the guys went back down to the guys' room. We were talking, and one of the kids said that this place was haunted, and that the closet that leads into the girls' section was where someone was hanged. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I always had a strange feeling about the doorway. So much, in fact, that I specifically put my sleeping bag across the other side of the room. There was also an air vent there, and I was afraid as well. So I then moved it into the middle. Even if I had to sleep in between 2 guys, I didn't mind. That night, after the counselors shushed us to sleep, because you know, guys, we talk for hours on end if we're told not to sleep, it was around maybe 4:30 when I awoke. My head was facing towards the closet when I noticed something going down. The closet door was slowly opened. I was kind of stunned. Girls shouldn't be peeping on guys. That's when I see a shadow no bigger than 6 feet. It was crazy tall for its size. Now best I can describe it from memory is like the color Vanta black. Google it. It was very blurry but crisp until the middle. It slowly inched its way across the wooden floorboards with no sound, suddenly passing each kid as it went by. I didn't want this thing to see me, so I turned my head and it passed more kids. The more it went down, I was now trembling. I didn't know what it wanted. It kept moving slowly, passing a few kids ahead of me. And then it happened. The more it approached me, the more I felt dread. Not only did I feel dread, but the air got colder. And not just like the physical cold feeling. It felt cold in my insides. The air got more dry and cold, like liquid nitrogen. The greatest amount of that feeling happened when it passed me. I was maybe a few feet to the door, so when it went to the other entrance I was at, this thing was literally turning the doorknob. It pulled the door open and slowly exited before, strangely enough, shutting the door behind itself. That morning we were getting up from bed and walked down the rickety old steps. One of the kids said, "Did you guys see that shadow last night?" And maybe 4 kids' eyes widened. We all blurted out that we had. We talked about it for a short while, and let's just say after that experience, everyone's sleeping bag was moved to the other side of the room. I was exploring an abandoned multi-level tech school building for fun and creepy sensations about 9 years ago, when I thought I heard voices cooing down from the floor above me. I was already feeling a bit like Diablo, given how many spiders I had to kill just to get where I was. Then a rat fell out of a vent duct behind me, and I realized the voices were the augmented chatter of rodents. The walls were full of them. I mostly poked around and then got the hell out of there. Also eerie on that trip, in the bomb shelter portion of the building, there was a roasting spit that some homeless person had set up, and there was a dog skeleton where the fire would have been. Sad and disturbing that someone would be driven to eat an animal capable of empathy. But desperate times, I suppose. My mum is a trucker, and this is her story. She was driving through Arizona when she saw what she thought were leaves blowing across the road in the distance. This puzzled her, since there's mostly pine trees in northern Arizona. When she finally got to the leaves, she realized that they were migrating tarantulas, thousands of them. There were so many of them that her truck was sliding on their guts and she had to slow down. She stopped at the first truck stop and told her co-driver to fuel up, as he was sleeping at the time, because she wasn't going to step foot outside her truck after what she just saw. Her co-driver was passed since it was technically his off time, and he thought she was crazy, until he saw the tarantula guts and legs caking the inside well of the truck. She also outran a tornado in the Midwest. She was about to pull over and take cover until she saw another big rig that was parked on the side of the road get tossed a couple of 100 yards like a toy. She called me and told me that she thought she was going to die, and she wanted her last words to be, "I love you" to me. She pulled off the freeway and got into a Walmart, where she ran into the shelter, where all the staff and customers were taking refuge. After the tornado passed, they stepped out of the basement and into daylight, since the Walmart was destroyed. She has many stories like this. Trucking is 90% boredom, 10% insane stuff like this. Like most millennials, I have to work multiple jobs to make money, and one of these jobs is driving for Lyft. Last night, a very friendly and pleasant passenger forgot her phone in my car. I didn't discover that until the morning when she sent a notification through Lyft. Since I had other work to do, I didn't get to returning the phone until early this afternoon. By then, my passenger had given me her address, so I drove to her apartment to return the phone. Now, this apartment has a very narrow one-way road running in front of it, but it was empty since it was the middle of the day, so I parked my car on the road with the hazard lights on to return the phone. It took me a few minutes at most to figure out where to leave the phone, and once I left the phone somewhere safe, I saw a lady in a red car pull up behind me and ran down the stairs to go grab my car. She rolled down the window and asked if I was looking for someone. I told her I had found who I was looking for, jumped back into my car while she was still speaking, and drove out of her way and out of the apartment complex. That should have been the end of it. I decided to drive to Starbucks since I was hungry and going through caffeine withdrawals, so I stayed on the main road and headed that way. That's when I noticed something peculiar. The lady was following right behind me, but since that road leads to practically everything else in my city, I didn't think anything of it, until I signaled to turn left to go to a shopping area and noticed that she was still behind me. Growing suspicious, after I made my left turn, I turned suddenly into a road that led into a bank and other small businesses, not realizing it was one way. When I reached the dead end, I turned around and headed back to the main road, only to realize this lady was still stalking me. In panic, I reached the main road, turned into one of the parking lots, and cut through to a local movie theater, and kept driving until I was sure I had lost her. When I noticed the lady wasn't following me anymore, I drove to Starbucks, got my food and drink, and returned home, played some video games and other stuff, and ran upstairs to tell my story on Reddit, only to discover that Lyft had emailed me, issuing a deactivation warning for unsafe driving. Of course, I can't say with certainty, but given what I've just said, I think it was the stalker that reported me. My girlfriend and I had been dating for around 3 years, and I have never had an experience that was as close of a call as this time. We are mostly nocturnal creatures, especially when we're used to working the night shift at a factory together. To us, midnight used to be like noon, and we loved going out to the store around this time because we are usually the only 2 of 10 people in the place, including staff. One night a year or so ago, we were doing our normal Saturday evening shop at around midnight, when I got the strangest feeling, not even 5 minutes into our journey. It constantly felt like we were being followed, but every time I would look there'd be no one there. I eventually wrote this off as paranoia and started to have a good time and make an adventure out of the trip. We were finishing up on the non-grocery side of Walmart, taking the long, straightaway roads towards the groceries so we can get down to business on getting food. My girlfriend was telling me about her last attempts and statistics of her shiny hunt in Pokemon Ultra when I finally noticed him. I heard a slight clicking noise and looked back casually to see a man pushing a bicycle alongside him, walking a few steps back. It was brand new, like he had just pulled it off the rack as he walked past, and was staring at me. I got a bad feeling. I positioned myself on the other side of my girlfriend, so that I was between him and her purse, which raised red flags to her. I told her to keep walking and act natural. A few minutes go by and the man makes a mad dash around a median chip display towards us, stopped dead when he saw we didn't flinch. Now, I'm not exactly a muscular guy, but I suppose my 6'4" stature made him nervous about what I was capable of, since I was wearing heavy winter clothing. I never broke eye contact until he turns around and walks back in the direction he was following us from and vanished. For about 30 minutes we shopped around, wondering if I was just being paranoid still, and we disregarded it as much. That is, until we were checking out. As I finished checking out the groceries and got ready to pay, I saw the same man on the bicycle with the front basket full of food and a woman's purse in his right hand, pedaling as hard as he could. An employee made an attempt to grab him but was too slow and he got away. Then we asked a nearby employee if we just saw what we think we did and told them about what happened with us, and they said they weren't allowed to tell us anything and threatened to charge us with trespassing if we didn't leave immediately. To this day I have no idea if they ever caught the guy or got the purse back. We still joke about this, and her family says that it's possible I could have died if I fought back, but figure if he had a gun, he wouldn't have hesitated like what he did when he finally caught up to us. My sister, who passed away in October, had an ex-husband called Todd. He's 6 foot tall, and while I'm 4'9", I'm hardly very intimidating. But due to who I know, I can scare creepers pretty well. But Todd is a whole another class of creepy. Now, I did not know he had a dummy account on Facebook, and I was talking to friends about attending an anime con alone. My fiance Rick backed out and said he'd pick me up for dinner. On the day of the con, I was dropped off with my panel gear and was set to meet at the hotel with 2 friends, Danny, a girlfriend, and Jade. They let me keep my stuff in the hotel room so that I could enjoy the con, get my badge and prepare for 2 panels that I was running: Japanese mythology and fandom pride. I was excited but also felt weirded out. I did not own a smartphone back then, or would have gotten texts from my sister. Apparently, the messages I did not get informed me that Todd and his new girlfriend were at the convention, and he was looking for me. So around 9 p.m., I finished my first panel, and Jade treated me to some food, if you call going to 7-Eleven for hot dogs food. We were enjoying it in the lobby when Todd, who I didn't even recognize, came over. He was hanging on the side of a seat, and he was drunk as hell. I asked what the hell he was doing there, and he asked me why I wasn't home minding my fiancée like a good girlfriend. I was a little surprised by that, and went back to Jade and Danny's room to call Rick. Sure enough, Rick said he was coming to the hotel and to wait in the room. We did, and I heard something I never wanted to hear coming from the hall. Someone shouted, "He has a knife!" Danny looked out the door and saw Todd coming down the hall yelling for me. I went pale and wanted to hide in the bathroom. I felt sick. Danny closed and locked the door, hoping Todd didn't see us. Todd was called, but it was so dim in the halls of the hotel no one could tell. He was banned for the con, thank goodness. Rick stayed with me all night when he arrived and helped me with the last panel. We decided to stop going to conventions for a year, and my sister and mum opted to extend the no-contact order onto Rick and I against Todd. We have not seen Todd in 3 years and hope to never do so again. This took place back in 2016. I at the time was a 16-year-old girl at a summer camp. This summer camp took place at a college about 45 minutes away from me. I was there for filmmaking and knew everyone in the program. Yes, there were other programs such as dance, drama, and visual arts, but there was still a limited amount of people. The film camp lasted longer than all of the other ones, so by the last week, there were about 50 of us on campus. So you remember faces. There was a certain spot on campus where a lot of people would go to watch the sunset. Two of my friends and I decided to sit up there. There were many people to begin with, so we felt comfortable. I should have mentioned this earlier, but the campus is located in the sketchier part of town, and there are gates at the entrance from the outside. As it got darker and darker, more and more people went back to their dorms. The three of us stayed out even in the dark, and there were street lamps, and I had my camera, and one friend has her laptop, so it isn't pitch black. It's around 9:30, and a man walked in front of us. We waved and smiled as he walked by. The only thing is, I've never seen him before. Even a week ago, before all of the other sessions left, I had never seen him before, and at most there had been 250 people on campus. I tell my friends that it's kind of creeping me out, that I've never seen him before, but the one with the laptop said it's nothing to worry about, seeing as there was campus security doing a checkup on a building near us. 10 minutes go by, and he walks in front of us again. After he leaves, the friend with the laptop, in a worried voice, says, "We need to go." So we grab all our belongings and are walking fast back to the dorms. I get her to explain to me why she was worried. She said that when he walked by again, he looked over his shoulder and did a head nod in the distance. And when she looked over, she saw another man in the darkness. We laughed it off as we got closer to the dorms, but all I could think about to myself was, why didn't we leave when I said we should? Nobody ever listens to me, even though I have great intuition. Anyway, to the creepy men who seemingly were planning on mugging us, or worse, let's not meet. I was 16 years old when I had just gotten my license. It was on a Friday after school, and I was hanging out with some of my friends from another school district, my girlfriend and her best friend. We all live in small, rural towns that have absolutely nothing to do in a 40-mile radius except a Walmart in between and a few Sheetz gas stations. Since there was nothing to do, we used to go ghost hunting. It pretty much meant finding abandoned buildings and checking them out. None of us really ever experienced anything supernatural, but it was an interesting time, and it involved doing something with friends. I had seen a house off the highway a few times that I wanted to check out, so I told them about it. They all agreed that it was a good idea. We decided to stop at Walmart on our way to grab a new flashlight, and I wanted batteries for my camera. Two of my friends and I bought a flashlight and 2 packs of batteries each, and I bought a 4-pack for my camera. We have a habit of keeping the batteries that come with flashlights as emergency backups because they don't seem to last as long. Armed with new flashlights, batteries, and energy drinks, we were more than ready to head to the house. The house was a 2-story one, with a basement all broken down, and was about a half-mile off the highway in the middle of a huge field. You could pretty much see it on the hill the whole hike. Just seeing it standing there with moonlight shining through it was creepy, let alone the idea of going in it. There was also a barn that had fallen down about 50 yards from the right side. The closer and closer we walked, the weirder and weirder it felt. Hair-raising weird. The front porch steps were broken, so we had to climb up to the porch to get in. Stepping over the debris from other people busting the place up, we made our way. On our way through the living room to the kitchen, my girlfriend claimed she felt someone pulling the hood on her sweatshirt, but I was the last person, and I was several feet behind. I figured she was either so scared that she was imagining things, or just saying stuff to try and freak everyone out. We made our way around the kitchen, and were on our way upstairs, when she gasped and spun around, claiming she felt her hood being pulled. and that I was an arse for trying to scare her. I swore it wasn't me, and we continued taking pictures all the way up. We made it all the way to the top of the stairs, and I saw a big hole in the attic, so I started walking towards it to take a picture. I snapped one on the way to it, and then another a little closer. The attic stairs were in a room to the left, and there was a hallway with rooms off to the right. We all went to the attic first to check it out, which was all the way up, and there was an old wooden ladder and a broken crate. We walked back down to the second floor quite disappointed. At that point, I was the only one with a flashlight out, so everyone followed me through the hallway to a room on the end to the left. It seemed really breezy in the room compared to the rest of the house, even though there were broken open windows all throughout. After the last person was about 3 steps in, my flashlight went out. It was still turned on, but it seemed like it went dead. The first thing I thought was, there's no way these brand new batteries went dead in 20 minutes in an LED flashlight. Almost instantly after, I heard someone say, "My phone's dead." "Yeah, mine too," from my girlfriend and her best friend. One of my other friends pulled out their flashlight, flicked it on and off, and nothing happened. I pulled my camera from my pocket, took a picture with the hope of maybe catching something weird, but the screen was black, with a flashing, red, dead battery symbol. At that point, we were all weirded out and practically fighting each other to leave. Once we made it to the stairs, the flashlight worked again. My camera had about 3/4 of a battery bar, and the cell phones were able to be powered back on. I got goosebumps and tensed up, and we hastened our pace down the stairs and figured the easiest way out would be through the basement door that we saw under the porch on our way in, since the porch stairs were broken. Sadly, it wasn't the least creepy way. We made our way down through the basement that turned out to be a basic maze and looked like it had been in the Blair Witch Project. We fought our way through the vines that had grown over the door to the outside and made our way from the house. About 200 yards from the house, we heard what sounded like a tin food can being spiked on the ground and then rolling down from the basement steps. I don't even remember seeing a tin can anywhere in the house, and we all began running as fast as we could while being careful not to trip over something in the high weeds. Once we returned to the car, we tried to theorize what the hell just happened, and I started looking through all the pictures. They all just looked like dust particle-ridden pictures of an old house, except for one. When I snapped the 2 pictures of the attic, the first was just like all the others, but the second had a thick, white smoky mist over the whole. It wasn't cold, just a coolish night, so there's no way it would have been breath mist and no one smoked. To this day I get goosebumps and a little glassy-eyed every time I look through these pictures. I posted them to a forum for people into the paranormal, and everyone told me I had to make an interesting experience post, and that I'd taken a very interesting picture. I'm not a trucker, but a dispatcher. We had a driver who had, shall we say, an odor problem. I'm not talking like body odor like sweat. I'm talking like stale urine. Any time he'd come into the dispatch office, it was a race to have him leave again. The kind of putrid tang that would make you gag immediately and completely involuntarily, regardless of your best efforts. The driver was a rather heavy-set guy, nice enough, but a little slow. We let it go until we started getting complaints from customers about the smell. Now this driver was a flatbed driver, meaning most of his deliveries were onto construction sites, job sites, steel and lumber mills. Therefore 90% were outdoors, and in the company of rough and tough dudes who otherwise wouldn't give a damn what you smelled like. We get a couple of phone calls a week from a job foreman saying that they wouldn't take this guy onto their site anymore because even outdoors the smell was so bad for the workers. We started delicately attempting to bring it up, trying to urge proper hygiene. He claimed he showered every day or at least every other day at worst, and that he just smelled like that and has had the problem for as long as he could remember. There was nothing he could do. At some point he had to bring his truck in for maintenance. It was a company truck. He didn't own it. But we don't rotate trucks, so we had the same one for months. Something had to be checked in the gear shift, so the mechanic had to get inside the truck. Upon climbing into the cab, the mechanic promptly did a 180 and puked out the driver's side door. It was then that the big piss bucket was discovered. I'm not talking like a Gatorade bottle or something that he took a leak in once when he didn't have time to stop. I'm talking like a job site shop bucket, filled nearly to the brim with urine. The floor around it was wet, indicating that part of it had splashed out. The inside of the cab, I'm told, because I was too chicken to go anywhere near it, smelled like him times 10. It was basically pure, concentrated evil. The walls of the cab had a slight yellow/brown dull sheen. We fired the driver, using the complaints from the customers as the excuse, and then parked the truck outside in the yard, doors and windows open for a week just to dull it. Then had a guy with a ghetto-pieced hazmat suit, rubber gloves, rubber boots, mask, rain slicker, etc., had to go in there and douse the whole thing in bleach and cleaners. And yet, no matter what they did to it, they could not get rid of the smell. That truck sat outside in our yard for a full year, windows and doors standing open, rain, snow, blustery wind. It just sat wide open to the elements. One day, a year later, the boss decided to close it up and see how it was. It was just as bad as the day they tried to clean it. He scrapped the truck a week later. It was 2006, and I was 17. I was dating a boy a few years older in the neighboring town from mine. My parents were not too keen on the fact I was dating an older guy, so they were not trying to give me rides over to his house or anything. His car was broken down at the time, and I didn't have a car, so I was on my own. Sometimes if I was feeling energetic, I'd walk to his house after school. It was about a 45-minute walk, which sucked, but I did it sometimes. When either of us had a few extra dollars, I would take a cab. I was a nervous person, always taught about stranger danger, and I'm really good at reading people with bad vibes. I called my boyfriend, who called me a cab, and would pay for it when I got there. The guy picked me up and started making his way to my boyfriend's house. He was a younger guy, but older than my boyfriend and I, maybe around 25. Right away I got sketched out by the way he looked at me, staring at me up and down, and insisted I sit in the front seat. He said his backseat was pretty messy, and liked to chat. Red flag number 1. It's a cab. Why is your backseat messy? I was getting serious bad vibes. I got in the front and thought a quick 10-minute cab ride would be over soon. I messaged him to tell him I was in the cab and that I would be there in 10 minutes. The driver just starts talking, asking me questions about my life and whatnot. I don't remember the exact details, but I do remember telling him that I would be going to my boyfriend's house, but he had to get another person and drop them off first. I was like, what? And alarm bells were going off in my head. I was thinking that this is not what normally happens, but he is a guy who worked for a legit cab company, meaning his job knew where he was, so he couldn't do anything, right? He got on the walkie and lied to the cab company saying he didn't pick me up yet and was going to another fare closer by first. I planned on jumping out the cab and running if he tried anything. Well, he ended up picking up the other person, an old man in the same direction of my boyfriend's house. He didn't mention his messy backseat to the guy. The customer was talking and like, "Oh, so you're bringing your girlfriend to work?" And the driver didn't even correct him and just say, "No, she's a customer." So I knew something was wrong and messaged my boyfriend on the sneak. He called me and asked to talk to the driver. I don't know what he said, but he was obviously pissed off and the driver hung up. He was like, "Why'd you call him? I'm not a creep. I just wanted you to help me with my room." He handed me a stack of papers, asking if I could help him pick up another customer and he would drop me off at the end. I told him I needed to get to my boyfriend's now. I don't know how, but he ended up dropping me off and peeling away before my boyfriend could get his hands on him. I can't imagine what would have happened if I didn't have a boyfriend who was angry on the phone and shook him. That's the most I remember. I'm sure there are details that I missed. But we did call the cab company and file a complaint. I'm not sure whatever came of it. I never took another cab for a long time, and now to this day, I always get nervous if I have to take an Uber home and stay on the phone while sharing my location at all times. Thanks for running cabs for me. This happened 19 years ago, when I was 19, and just moved into my first real house with roommates that I picked. We decided to head to Walmart to pick up some house things and whatnot. 6 of us go. It's myself plus 4 female roommates and one roommate's boyfriend called Daniel. We head to Walmart in my 98 Bronco 2, Jesus, the most badass vehicle to ever vehicle. We get there and start shopping in a perfectly normal fashion. I mean, we're being loud and obnoxious young adults, but that's normal. Now, for the story's sake, I need to let you know that I am a talker. I talk to everyone. I compliment strangers, say hello if we make eye contact while walking, that sort of thing. I will not say that I do not know a stranger because I am terribly shy when I'm alone, but when in a group, I am very outgoing and friendly, and that was my mistake this evening. We're 2 hours in, and we pass this dude probably our age, but no one can really tell. As I glance up, we make eye contact, so I feel obligated to say hello. And we all go about our merry way. Only, he went about our merry way. We are in this store for a solid 45 minutes, haven't even gotten halfway through, and he crosses our paths again. He walks up to me with his head down, like with his chin to his chest, sticks out his hand and says, "Here," and rushes away. It's his phone number. Oh man, that's super sweet. I feel bad having no intention of calling him, but it was a sweet gesture, or so I thought. It had now been the better part of 2 hours, going down every aisle discussing as adults what we do or do not need. We thought we were so grown. Let's discuss whether these trash bags are cost efficient before buying them in a group, all huddled up like adults do. And we cross paths with him once more. He stops in the middle of the aisle and just stares at us as we pass. I'm a little weirded out, and so is Daniel, the roomie's boyfriend, and he grabs my hand and starts acting like he's my boyfriend. The guy proceeds to follow us through the remainder of our journey. We get to the checkout. There are 5 girls, each with a full cart. Poor cashier. I know she was just done. And we see him 4 lanes away checking out with a soda. Daniel is getting uneasy and pissed off, so he grabs my waist and loudly shouts, "Let's go, babe," or some stuff like that. And we walk out. He walks out with us. We get to my car and begin loading things, and this guy goes to his car and just sits there staring. Daniel is now standing near the back of the car with a rubber mallet just smacking into his hand like he's a mobster, thinking it would make the guy leave. But it did not. We finish loading, and pile in to head out. I turn my vehicle on, and the dude's vehicle starts as well. We pull out and head home normally until Daniel, who's been watching these headlights like a hawk, says, "Don't go home. Drive to the police station or a firehouse or something. That guy's been behind us since we left Walmart." All 5 of the 19-year-old girls he's in the car with start freaking out. The dude stays with us until we turn into a fire station and he kept going. And we sat in the parking lot for a good 20 minutes to half hour looking to see if he'd come back. He didn't, and we head home. This event is why I haven't been back to Walmart since. I still talk to random strangers though. I can't help it. I really like people. But to the Walmart crew, let's not meet again. I'm going to take you back a few years to when I was working at McDonald's. For context at the time, I was a 16-year-old female. Now at the McDonald's I worked at, when you are on headset, you answer people at the drive-thru. You are normally required to be at the first window to also take payment. My job position was customer care manager at the time, so my job was to be on the front desk, but 99% of the time, they required me to be behind tills. So I was having a normal day, working a long shift, but having a normal work day. I happened to be on headset, and first window that day too. My headset buzzes, letting me know there's someone at my drive-thru lane. I go through to the first window to answer my customer, and this is how the conversation ensued. "Hello, welcome to McDonald's, what can I get you?" "Oh wow, you got a beautiful voice." His voice was grunty and husky sounding. Not off-putting, we have all sorts of customers come through McDonald's every day, so it didn't give me the creeps or anything. "Thank you, sir, how very flattering. What can I get you?" "I haven't decided yet." There's a long pause here. "Can I come to the first window to decide? I want to see who I'm talking to." Now we weren't very busy at this point. The creeper hadn't actually creeped me out. I mean, all he'd done was pay me a compliment, and we quite often had people complaining that they preferred face-to-face contact, so this certainly wasn't out of the blue or unusual. "Yeah, sure sir, that's fine." "Wow, you're as beautiful as you sound." "Thank you sir, have you decided what you're going to order? Are you an option?" I laughed nervously at this. It was my first job, and I wasn't the rude kind of person where someone was paying me a compliment. I must also point out this guy must have been in at least his 60s. I remember he had one lazy eye that looked to the left, painfully awful teeth, and patchy dark brown hair. At this point, I was a little bit uncomfortable, but was still more than willing to take his order. "I'll have a cheeseburger." "Okay sir, that'll be 99p. Are you paying cash or card?" Without answering my question, he started asking me where I'm from, how old I was, etc. But it wasn't until his last question that I got super weirded out. "What time do you finish work?" 7:30, why? I didn't actually finish at 7:30, but 7:30 was the first number that came into my head when I blurted it out. I finished at 8 and would probably do some overtime too, but I wasn't about to let him know that. "I can meet you if you want. I could pick you up outside and we can go somewhere." All the while he's saying this, he has this horrendous grin on his face and keeps winking at me. "I'm really sorry, sir. I'm not allowed to meet customers outside of work. It's against employee policy." This was utter bull, but I needed him to leave me alone, and he carries on being insistent, but not getting the picture, and I cut the conversation short. "Anyway, sir, sorry to be rude, but can I have the 99p for your cheeseburger?" "Ah, yes, sorry. See you at 7:30. Off he drove to the next window, and I was gobsmacked. I'd already said I wasn't going to see him. I was a little bit shocked, but was not going over there to give him the satisfaction of talking to me again. My co-worker came to me and said, "Ew, that guy had a major crush on you." and wanted your number, but I didn't give it to him. He's old enough to be your dad, if not older. Anyway, I explained exactly what happened and how uncomfortable it made me. 7:30 came around and my co-worker spooked. The creeper was actually waiting in the car park for me, just like he said he would. He sat halfway down the car park, and you could see him just staring in. Our car park wasn't very big. It only had 4 rows of parking spaces, so he wasn't that far away, and would have clocked me the minute I walked out the door. At this point, I'm freaking out, and head to the back of the store where hopefully he can't see me. I had to stay in the back of the store for 40 minutes before we knew it was safe to come out. Fast forward a week and Creeper is back on drive-thru. And guess who's back on headset at window 1? Me. I heard his voice and recognized it straight away. I was hoping I'd hear your voice again. Why didn't you meet me the other day? 1 second, sir. I'll be with you in 1 second. I immediately handed my headset to my manager and gave him a quick briefing of the situation. He gladly took the headset and dealt with the customer from start to finish. When my manager came back to me to let me know he'd gone, he said the creeper had been asking my name, my address, and my surname. My manager said he was the most creepiest guy he'd ever met, and I was never to have anything to do with him again. If he came back to work while I was there afterwards, my manager would have to head me to the back room while he dealt with him. He still asked about me every time. So to the creepy McDonald's guy, let's never meet again. This happened when I was a 9-year-old lad, at a church of all places, long before my drug problem ever started. So, you guys can know for a fact I wasn't tripping. My church was having a summer camp type of thing for all the kids during the school holidays. My parents wanted me and my cousin, who was 12 at the time, out the house and sent us along. So there we were, a group of around 50 kids in this huge church with around 5 youth leaders. We were watching movies, playing games, and whatever else. Things are good. One day everyone is outside playing some weird ball game. The sun is out and the day was good. I figured I'd go inside to grab my cap so that I wouldn't get a sunburn. Worst mistake ever. I go inside. Keep in mind it's a big church and my bag is right in the front. I see it and think, that's weird. Wasn't it more to the back where I was sitting? I say screw it and take a stroll to the front and open my bag, looking around for my cap. When I hear someone whistle for me, I turn my attention behind me to the huge whiteboard that the projector hits, and there he is. A man, skin as white as snow, his ashy hair falling down from the sides of his fedora. He's dressed in a suit. He waves at me with cold eyes and a crooked smile. I drop to the floor, my body starts shaking uncontrollably, and I don't know what to do. It feels like my heart's gonna burst. In comes my cousin with another girl who we became friends with. They're shaking me and I don't know what to do. They call in another lady, a youth leader, and they watch over me and I eventually stop. They pick me up and want to take me to hospital, but I tell them it's fine. I had never had a seizure before, and I didn't even get what the big deal was. They rush me outside and carry me through the crowd to a car. And in the crowd, there he is, clear as day, tipping his hat before vanishing. They rushed me outside and called my parents. I told them what happened, and my parents were pale. I've had a history of experiences like this, you see. The pastor convinced them to let me stay, and apparently what I said to my parents before they left was, look at how they run around in the circle with the children, as I pointed to the kids playing. I still think about the white-skinned man from time to time. Fun fact, when I was a baby, a random lady approached my parents and told them I was a special baby and walked away. Maybe that's why I see all the weird stuff. I'm from Louisville, Kentucky. Anyone who is big into paranormal activity is probably aware of a place called the Waverly Hills Sanatorium. It's an old tuberculosis hospital that had a lot of people die in it. Anyway, I did security tours / caboose video work for them for about 2 years, from 2005 to 2007. Now I will say this before this. I did not believe in ghosts, spirits or what have you. It didn't seem possible, but after working and volunteering there, I left fully convinced. Too many experiences to count, but I'll list the ones that got me the most. One morning, after an overnight tour, as people pay $100 to be allowed to roam free in the building and ghost hunt for 8 hours, another security guard and myself were walking through the building, locking all the doors and such so that we could go home. I was walking down the hallway when suddenly out of the corner of my eye I saw something or someone run. That was freaky. What really scared the crap out of me was the fact that I also heard bare feet slap the ground as they ran. We took off after them and should have cornered them, but there was nothing there. Scary stuff. Anyone ever watched Celebrity Paranormal Project on VH1? Well, they came and filmed there. Gary Busey, Hal Sparks, and some other celebrities I didn't know were there for that episode. I will tell you, VH1 rigged the hell out of this place. Most of the stuff that happened on this episode didn't really happen. I won't mention what to spoil anything, but still. What was real scary was after a long 12-hour day of myself PAing on set, I stayed behind to do security. 3 crew members came after hours to check the place out, and I think it was the camera rigging guy that I took. We went into the building on the 3rd floor and sat in the middle of a hallway. We sat there for a while, and I'll never forget, as we were sitting there, I was looking one way as he was looking another. Now I will mention that in this building there are 5 floors, with electricity only running to 2 of them, with the exception of exit signs, fire codes and such. And while I'm looking down the hallway, suddenly, the last room I can see starts to light up from inside. I instantly get up and begin to walk over there. The light in the room was hovering, as if someone had a flashlight and was waving it around. I got about 10 feet from the door and shut it off, so I ran in there and there was nothing. I looked out the window to make sure no one was messing with me and called the other guard in the building, but he was on the 5th floor. Totally unexplainable. But the one thing that to this day gets me the most is something that I actually got proof of. Another night, me and another security guard were wrapping up a half-night tour. Like the full night tour, but only $50 and 4 hours. As we were walking on the 2nd floor, the guard stopped me. We looked down the hallway and saw the interior/exterior doors were wide open. These doors were installed after the current owners bought the place, and they are big, heavy doors that lock, and you can't unlock them from the outside without a key. Anyway, the other security guard swore up and down that he saw a tall dark figure walk out the door, but I didn't. After a little debate, we decided that maybe it was another security guard and we didn't want to lock him out, so we left the doors open. A few days pass, and while I'm there I hear 2 other security guards talking about something they witnessed. When I spoke to them, they told me both the same story, how they both saw the tall dark figure and went running after it. That's the moment when I suddenly realized that there was a motion detecting camera on the door, so I hit the computer to see what I could find. What I saw was crazy. The door that was shut, out of nowhere, just suddenly swings open by itself and there's no one around. Time code on the camera showed how the camera would kick on when its motion detected. Like for a moth or other bug, the door swings open and no one was there. 4 hours passed and the next thing on the camera was the guards running out the door. Scary place, man. I highly suggest visiting it if you get a chance. This didn't happen to me, but my father told me last week, about a few years ago when he was driving a road train here in Queensland, Australia. It was him and 3 other road trains, I think, and he was the second guy in line. Some guy tried to overtake all of them before the overtaking lane ended. This lane wasn't very long, about 1 kilometer, and they were few and far between along this road. Now this guy had run out of room by the time he had gotten to the truck at the front, and so he went off the road and rolled his car. The trucks was stopped, and my father got out and ran towards the car, which was now on fire. The first truck driver was much closer to the car than my father was, due to these trucks being a good 100 meters long. When Dad got there, the truck driver just had his hands in the air to say, "No, I can't handle this." What he had seen was the man still conscious, flailing about in the car burning alive. Dad didn't want to see something so horrid that he didn't look, but he was still haunted by the fact that there was a man alive 1 minute ago driving past him, but was now in the burning car that he saw ahead. The truck driver still has PTSD today and can't get over it and feels terrible, despite the fact it was 100% definitely not his fault. Driving back from the road trip, someone tried overtaking my father again on that same stretch of road, not 2 kilometers away from the night before. There were police up ahead, and the guy was up to about 200 kilometers an hour just to get ahead of Dad before the lane ended. So he slams on the brakes just before he can get seen by the coppers, and Dad says he barely braked in time to not send him flying ahead, due to road trains having a much harder time braking than a car does. They get pulled over, and my dad abused the hell out of this guy, because he was still upset about the night before, and he sure as hell didn't want to see that again, and the guy acted like he had no idea what he did. I have never seen my dad afraid, but I could see in his eyes how scared he was when he told me this, because that moment terrified him so much that he could have been the guy who had taken another man's life so quickly. I hope that people can understand that trucks, especially road trains, don't have the same capability as cars. You should know how to act around them and how they work. And for anyone wondering what a road train is, imagine an old-looking, generally all-round gargantuan-sized semi-truck hauling 3, sometimes 4 normal-sized trailers at the same time. Yeah, hauling that much stuff, of course it's not going to be able to stop as fast as your 1994 Honda Civic. I'm a 26-year-old female living in a big city. I work every day, even during the pandemic, and take public transportation to work, so I've dealt with my fair share of men aggressively trying to talk to me, or even sometimes look for a fight. I put a deposit down on my own apartment, so I was across the city dropping my deposit off. It started pouring, so instead of making the arduous journey home on the bus, one transfer and lots of walking, and I didn't have a raincoat, I decided to call a lift. My driver gets there, pulls up, and is motioning for me to get in. I notice he isn't wearing a face mask, so when he rolls the window down, I say, "Oh hi, I'll just wait for you to put your mask on." He then comes out with, "What the hell does it look like in my hand?" I was a bit taken aback. "Oh, I'm just waiting for both of us." He hesitated a second, then gave me an angry scowl. I don't think I've ever experienced anything like this from a stranger, just pure anger. Like if I were in front of him, he would have murdered me. I swear it was that intense. He then said, "Do you think I need you to tell me to put it on?" No, I'm just waiting," I replied. He then gave me a look again and sped off, not before calling me a very few choice swear words. Of course, I reported him to Lyft, but the best part of the story is the strangers that backed me up. One woman said that she saw what was going on and that it was messed up, and the two older men who waited with me while I cried for my next ride provided words of comfort. Not everyone's that bad, but the crappy ones are truly the worst. My mom brought up an interesting point, as that since I probably got this guy fired, he's gonna have even more violent rage. I certainly hope he didn't get my name and address from Lyft. A few weeks ago, I was in Walmart with my gran. We were walking around and shopping for stuff, your normal Saturday morning errand run. While walking around, I had begun to notice an older man in his late 30s/early 40s, kind of scruffy clothing that looked like he'd been working in a few of the same aisles as my gran. I thought nothing of it since it's Walmart and it's not that big of a store. At one point, my grandma asks me if I need any new bras. For those of you who don't know, Walmart sells $3.98 bras and they're awesome. I told her yeah, sure, and we went to the ladies' underwear section of the store. My grandma went to look at bras, and I went to see if they had any matching underwear when I noticed the man again. I walked down to the sock aisle and didn't see him, so I slowly made my way back to where the thongs and stuff were. I was minding my own business when I heard someone walk behind me. I figured it was my gram, so I partially turned to ask how many pairs I could get, but she wasn't behind me. I looked around and see the guy at the end of the aisle. Whatever, maybe he has a wife or girlfriend, and I went back into my little world looking for underwear. I looked for another minute or so when I felt a presence behind me. I looked to my left and saw a little bit of my grandma, who was obscured by the rack, looking at nightgowns. I decided to stare straight ahead since maybe someone taller than me was just looking at underwear that was over my head, and felt some kind of press against me. Then I heard breathing. It was heavy, pleasure breathing, like someone was just calming down after finishing. I turned on my heels to see this guy who had been following me, with his hands down his pants, obviously fondling himself. I literally screamed "Nanny," and the guy sprinted away. I told Walmart security and they told me they had no authority to do anything about it. I just can't get that sound of his breathing out of my head. I work in a store in the mall in a fairly nice area. I work right by the main doorway, which people come in and out of all day, unsurprisingly, and people hang out in the vestibule area between the outside and inside doors waiting for the bus to come. I usually work alone at night, lock up and leave through the same area, walk to my car and go home. 2 days ago, I end up working a morning shift and get to leave at 4 p.m. while it's still light out. Mind you, I'm a 22-year-old slim blonde girl and usually get mistaken for a 13-year-old. This day, I was wearing a pink sweatshirt, pink leggings, and my hair was in a ponytail, so I guess people could mistake me as young. Otherwise, normal day, whatever. I'm walking towards the vestibule, and when I push open the first set of doors, I always check if there's someone behind me, to see if I should hold the door open for them because I don't want to seem rude. So I see an Asian guy, tan jacket, khakis, casually walking a good distance behind me. I don't want him to try and hurry up, so I hold the door open with my foot for him to walk through while I check my phone. He walks through the door, grabs my arm and says, "Come with me. I know what you stole." He's grabbing my arm pretty hard and is pulling me. Mind you, there were two women on the opposite side of the vestibule, and a guy standing maybe 3 feet away, and I'm making eye contact directly with this guy with a "please help me" kind of look. The Asian guy continues saying, "Come with me," and is partway through the door to the outside, and I'm keeping my distance, trying to keep my arm close to my body and pull back. I think I mumbled something like, "I don't want to." I was so confused and couldn't even comprehend what I was doing. I thought for a second, is he joking? Does he think I'm someone else, or is he messing with me? Is he mentally ill? And if I pull back enough, is he gonna let go and casually walk out the door into his car and drive off? Me and the dude that were just standing there the whole time just had our jaws dropped, looking at each other, just trying to communicate what the hell that was. He thought the same thing. He ended up walking me to my car, telling me that I needed to report it. I gave him a big hug and thanked him and got into my car, called my mom, then security, and talked to the security and the police and spoke to a detective, the whole nine. Apparently this isn't the first time a tall Asian guy is acting weird. A guy, probably the same one, apparently harasses juvenile girls at the mall frequently, and isn't even supposed to be there. Security showed me some pictures of an Asian guy that they suspected, and caught the whole thing on camera. He apparently walked in only 15 minutes before this happened. I'm still kind of shaken. I'm putting in my 2 weeks on Monday. This happened 3 years ago when I was in scout camp. I was part of older scouts, so we were the ones entrusted to guard the camp at night. Every day a patrol is chosen, and they need to guard the camp with 2 people guarding it for 2 hours, then shift roles and pass it on to someone else in our year group. That night it was our patrol to do the job. Since there were 5 of us, I didn't have a partner, but a guy called Nick volunteered to join me. Nick was from another patrol where he was the cool guy, you know, handsome, funny, strong, and I was happy because we didn't know each other well, and at this point was the occasion to get to know each other a little bit better, and he was strong, so I wasn't scared of guarding at night. In the night, one of us would go look around the camp while the other guarded the campfire. I heard some weird noises that night, but it's a forest, so I didn't really think about it. After that, I told him the first episode of Stranger Things to scare him, and it worked. When there were just 20 minutes left, we decided to go together to look around, quickly finish the job and go back to sleep. After a few minutes around the camp, we arrived at the quarter of the young wolves, who were the junior scouts, in which my sister was a part of. I started to walk in their quarters, reaching the wooden gate they built, but when I crossed the gate I stopped moving. I don't know how to explain this, but you know when a weirdo on the street comes towards you with a knife, and all your senses are telling you to get away from danger? Now, I had just been hit with the same feeling but 10 times worse. All my senses were shouting, "Danger, get out," as I felt a fear so strong I was petrified for a moment. I felt a presence. I don't know what, but I felt something in the dark. I couldn't see anything in the darkness, but I was sure that there was something out there, something really dangerous. I was just standing there for what seemed like years, but suddenly, Nick grabbed my shoulder. He was pale, sweating, and scared to death. That was when I realized that he had experienced something too. I never saw him like this before. This strong guy, so sure of himself, who's everyone's friend, was scared like a child. And I was too. For a long time we both just looked at each other, and then he said to get out of here. We went back to camp and didn't talk to each other. 2 days later in the morning, when there was a flag lifting ceremony, Nick and I noticed that a girl was missing from one of the patrols. When the ceremony ended, we asked the girls why their patrol is incomplete, and they replied, "Katie passed out last night when she guarded the camp with Lily." We were both shaken, and I asked, "Why? What happened?" The girl named Lily replied, "We split up. I went to go to the plain side and she went deep into the woods to the wolves' quarters and I heard her scream, ran back and saw her passed out on the ground in front of the gate." We looked at each other with Nick and we knew what the other was thinking. We go talk to the girl in her tent and asked her what happened. She was really uneasy and wanted us to go away, but I asked her what she felt. That's when her facial expression changed. She was scared. She said, I don't, it was horrible. We patiently listened to her for a while as she tried to find the correct words to express herself. "I don't know what it was, but I never want to experience it again." She was shaking like a leaf. Many days passed, and at the end of camp, roughly the 11th day, we packed up our tents to sleep one last night under the stars near the campfire. But our patrol had a chill zone where we slept away from the camp. The camp was near the Danube, and our tent was just next to the little entrenchment of the river. There was an old chair buried half in the sand, probably a fishing spot for someone, and it looked so chill sitting down and looking over the water flow that it gave us an idea. We didn't move the chair, as it was like a part of the river, and near it we set up 4 hammocks in place and just chilled there every time we had a chance. So the last day we decided to sleep in there. I didn't bring myself a hammock because I can't sleep in one, it's too uncomfortable for me, so I slept on the ground between the hammocks of my friends, forming a pentagonal shape. They fell asleep quite quickly, while I was awake and listening to the flow of the river, and slowly fell asleep while my eyes were looking at the chair near from us. I opened my eyes. The sun had started to rise, and the environment wasn't that dark anymore. But when I started to see clearly and looked around, my heart stopped for a moment. I saw a shadowy figure sitting on the chair. I watched him for I don't know how long, but at some point he turned around and noticed me. I was alone, scared, and didn't know what to do. The figure stood up, stared at me with white, empty, glowing eyes, took a step, then a few more. And as he did, it felt like my heart was gonna jump out my chest. I looked around to see where my friends were sleeping and thought it was probably just a dream. It was morning after all. I stood up, packed up, but noticed something. The chair was somehow out of the sand, and there were fresh footprints next to it. 2 fresh footprints, as if someone had just stood up from the chair. It was a rainy, drizzly day on a Sunday in April. Me and my guy friend had planned to hang out the day before. We were both the age of 14. I left my house at 10 in the morning because we planned to get breakfast and met on our bikes around the corner of a street near my house. And then we left the neighborhood to a different town. I knew my mother probably wouldn't have wanted me to go, but we headed off on our bikes anyway. It took us an hour to get 3 towns over. We got food at some cafe and ended up in a sketchy neighborhood. And we rode on bikes looking for something to do until we stumbled upon an abandoned house. We parked our bikes on the side of the house behind a large bush so no one would see them, and we looked around. It looked pretty broken down and had a creepy look to it. The house had a fair amount of caution and do not enter signs on it, which was enough of a warning for us, but we didn't listen. We ended up trespassing and breaking into the house through a back door that was open. I didn't want to because I was a bit of a scaredy cat and wasn't really into taking risks. I believed we would have gotten into trouble, but we never did, and he forced me to go in. It was a small broken wooden fence that you had to climb over before you were standing on the actual porch where the back door of the house was. The fence was broken with pieces of wood and glass sticking out, so you had to be careful climbing over it. The house smelt of rotten eggs and mold. I had a pit of guilt and fear in my stomach. I was scared out of my mind and jumped at every little creak and noise that came from the inside of the broken down old house. We looked for anything valuable on the first floor of the house, but there wasn't much. We stumbled up the creaky old staircase that led us to the second floor. I had no intention of following my friend up there, though. He went up by himself, and I waited at the bottom. He finally convinced me after much pleading to ascend, so begrudgingly I did. We didn't really find anything that valuable except for some fake jewelry and old pictures of the previous family members who once occupied the abode. And after raiding anything we could, we went back down the stairs. And here's the scary part. We found ourselves searching the bottom half of the house, after finding a few secret rooms we hadn't seen before. I suggested countless times that we should leave before someone found us, or that we got hurt by something, but my friend replied with, "Just give me a minute and we'll leave," which we never did. We stopped dead in our tracks when we heard faint footsteps coming from the upstairs right above where we were standing, and we made eye contact with each other. We were both terrified. After a few seconds, we heard a door slam from upstairs, and we bolted for the back door as quick as we could and slammed it shut behind us. My friend had quickly hopped over the broken fence onto the back porch. He was taller than me, so it was easier for him, but for me, being a much shorter girl, it wasn't easy. I ended up hopping over as fast as I could. Before my other leg was over the fence, I felt something cold brush past my ankle, but I didn't look back. I threw myself over the fence, twisted my ankle, and got a small cut on my leg. I limped to the bikes that were behind the bush where we'd left them, and we went off. We both headed straight home after that, and decided not to talk about what we saw. When I got home, I noticed that I had a bruise where I had felt that cold breeze as I was leaving the house. And I will never sneak into anywhere abandoned again. This happened in the mid-90s. I went on a road trip with my son, and for some stupid reason decided to take a different route home than the one I had taken previously and was familiar with. Turned out the new route was a super desolate road. I specifically chose to drive in the middle of the night, so my son would be sleeping and there would be less traffic. It's probably about 3 a.m., and of course my POS car breaks down. By some luck of the draw, I'm almost right in front of an abandoned roadside market and was able to coast into the parking lot. The windows are boarded up on the market, steam is pouring from under my hood, and it was essentially the start to every single dumb chick breaks down in the middle of nowhere and gets hacked to death movie you've ever seen. All of a sudden, I see headlights coming around the bend. I'd been driving this road for a couple of hours and had seen maybe 1 or 2 other vehicles at the time. A truck drives past, slows down, and I see the reverse lights come on in my rearview mirror. Deliverance banjo music starts to play in my head. The truck pulls up, so our vehicles are driver window to driver window, and I see the driver is an older man, and he is just staring at me. He looks like the stereotypical serial killer you visualize, with long, scraggly grey hair, grizzled stubble, and crazy sort of eyes. He motions for me to roll down my window. I'm trying to look anywhere but directly at him and act like I don't see him and everything's fine and dandy. Oh no, I'm not in any distress. Please, ignore the steam coming from my car. I'm good, thanks. He backs up a little, parks and gets out of his truck, and begins walking towards my car. I'm thinking this is where my son and I end up as news stories about bodies being found in the boonies when the snow melts. And he starts yelling, "Not gonna hurt ya. Roll down your window." I keep looking anywhere but at him, trying to give off a strong, "I don't want you to mess with me" kind of vibes. In reality, I'm crapping in my pants. He gives me a disgusted look, walks to his truck and starts digging around, and comes back with tools in hand. Now I'm thinking, oh my god, he's got tools. He's gonna bust my teeth out and cut my fingers off so I can't be identified. He yells to open the hood. I'm looking everywhere but at him. He yells it again. He wants to know what's wrong. I'm so scared, but I reach down and pop the hood open. He opens it, and I crouch down so that I can see him through the couple of inches where the hood is open. He looks up, and we make eye contact, and I about die. And he keeps doing whatever he's doing down there. He goes back and forth between his truck and my car a few more times, bringing more tools, a jug of something, and something else that I can't make out. After about 15 minutes, he closes my hood and yells at me to start it up. The car splutters a little, turns over, and then seems fine. He yells, "Be careful, a lot of weirdos out here." Gets in his truck, gives me one last disgusted look and drives off. My car made it home. My dad looked it over after I told him the story and deducted that the guy had changed the radiator hose. My dad pointed out many times that the chances of me being struck by lightning were probably better than my chances of some random guy in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the night, happened to be driving around with a radiator hose and the tools to replace it for whatever 10-plus-year-old POS foreign car I was driving. I study away from home, but go back for the holidays and other events. I went back home for New Year's after spending Christmas with my partner and his family. Outside the train station is a taxi area, and I got one to take me to my family home since it was late in the evening and I had a large suitcase with me. The driver starts out by making small talk, asking if I had a long journey and where I travelled from, and what brings me here. I answered his questions to not sound rude, and said I was visiting family for the holidays because I study away. He starts asking more questions that I didn't realize were weird at the time. I'm autistic, so social cues aren't my strong point, asking if I have any siblings. I have 4. How old they are, and if they're all from the same parents. Looking back, it's weird, but as I said, he seemed to be just coming off as friendly. He asked if my parents were still together, which I felt was a bit too much, so pretended I didn't hear him. He then asks how old I am, if I have a boyfriend, and I told him I was 20 and I do, hoping that he would stop talking. We get to my street, and I ask him to drop me off at the end because I don't like being dropped off at my house by strangers, so they don't know exactly where I live. He tells me how much the fare was, $6.50, and I saw the meter. So I gave him a 10 and he gives me $3.50 change. I get out and head down the street to my house. About 10 days later there's a knock at the door. My mum answers thinking it's a parcel, and it's the driver. He asks if I'm in and asks for me by name. I had work that day and got the train in my uniform, so I had my badge on, which I forgot about. I know I didn't tell him my name because that's too much for me. My mum tells him I'm not in, and he starts looking past her in the house, presumably to see if I'm hiding. He then tells her that he just realized he didn't give me the right change and he was here to give me the £1 he owes me. My mum assured him that he can keep it and that it's fine, but he's very insistent and asks if he can come in to give it to me. My mum tells him again that I'm not here, but was upstairs, and he offers to wait until I'm back. My mum told him he couldn't come in because she doesn't know him and there are children in the house, including my 1-year-old niece. After 10 minutes of saying he'll wait, and my mum asking for him to leave, he gives her this £1 before leaving and sitting in his car in the resident park on my street for another 10 minutes. He eventually leaves, which I guess means he was given a job, so thank God. I genuinely think he read my badge. I forgot I had it on, and then he watched me walk to my house so that he could come back later. Otherwise, he knocked on at least 10 other doors to find me, which is almost worse. The whole taxi ride he kept telling me what a pretty girl I am, so that makes the whole situation, to me, even more unsettling. I'm now terrified of getting another taxi and worried that he'll come back, not for my sake, but because there are young kids in the house. Very creepy encounter, and it's taken me a good few days to just process how weird it truly is. About 6 years ago, my mum and I went to Walmart to get her meds. She gets home from work late, so we go over to Walmart at around 7. The parking lot is horribly underlit, as is the entrance to the store. As we're walking towards the entrance, a man walks towards me and pauses like he's going to start a conversation with me. He's wearing a cap, cargo shorts and sneakers. I can't really make out any details of his face, but I'm fairly sure I didn't know him. My mum and I walk in and go to the pharmacy counter, which is right in the front of the store. I can now clearly see the guy. He looks to be in his late 20s/early 30s. He's very dirty, and his eyes are very sunken in. He keeps staring at me and walking around where we are. As my mum is speaking with the pharmacist, I notice another man start walking with the first. This man is very heavy set with dark hair and glasses, and is far dirtier than the other man. The pharmacist needs a few more minutes to fill in the last script, so we sit and wait. I tell my mum about the men, and she tells me to stay near her. The guy is in the cab, mumbling loudly to himself, and keeps pacing behind me. I ask my mum for the truck key so that I can wait outside for her. She says that being a little 17-year-old girl in a dark parking lot is a bad idea, even without 2 people following her. She sees that I'm uncomfortable and on the verge of tears, so she gets up and goes to talk to them. I'm her only child, so of course she's very protective of me. She walks over to the men, speaks to them for about 2 minutes, and they're far enough away that I can't hear what they're saying, but I can see how uncomfortable the men look. As my mum walks back to me, the men leave the store. I ask her what she said, and she just replied that she took care of it. I used to work tables in a restaurant. One day this guy I've never interacted with before comes to me and hands me a framed picture smiling nervously. I took it. It's a picture of me at the staff table. I was done eating and staring at nothing, probably thinking about something deep and clever. I looked at the guy, and he explains timidly that he found me so pretty that he took a picture and framed it so that I could see how pretty I was and to hold on to it forever. Sweet gesture, but kind of creepy. 5 seconds later, the manager walks by, hears the story, bursts out laughing and decides this is perfect, and hangs up the frame in the back, on the wall, next to the work schedules, in a place where everyone that works here looks at practically every day. He thought it was hilarious, everyone had a laugh, and we kind of forgot about it. The picture became part of the wall. It's been 8 years since I've worked there. The staff changed, the managers changed over the years. Everyone I knew changed jobs and everything. But my best work friend still remains. You know, the one person that could probably do another job better for her, but stays in this place out of pure habit, really. The one person that will always be there and still work there, probably 20 years after you moved on. She decided to keep the picture. She told the new managers that the girl on the wall was a waitress that worked here and died in an accident, and that the whole staff decided to frame her picture and honor her or whatever to keep her memory alive because she loved this place so much. You know, you get it. Well, 8 years later, when I occasionally visit the restaurant to say hello to my friend, I have a quick glance above the schedules, and the picture is still there. I wonder if the workers see me and do a double take that the ghost girl has come back to the restaurant. This happened to me a while back, when I was forced to go to summer camp. I say summer camp, it was more like Bible summer camp, so all the fun of summer camp with a good old Bible seminar thrown in every day for a few hours. That was fun, as you can imagine. So being the angsty, moody teen I was, I dug my heels in and refused to go, but ended up going anyway. I instantly hated the place, not because of anything that had happened or anything. I just really didn't want to be there, and made my attitude known to each and every person I interacted with, whether it be a fellow campee or even any of the adults that were chaperoning us or our Bible tutors and such. Each and every one of them knew that I didn't want to be there, but they did their best to try and be accommodating for my poor behavior, should we call it. In order to rebel, as I really didn't want to be there, aside from being moody, one of the things I liked to do was after hours when everyone was told to go to sleep, I would pull down the window as my bunk was next to the window. I didn't even care if the fellow girls heard me leave, because I honestly didn't think they would tattle on me. I'd jump out as it was a cabin and go for a walk in the darkness. On our first day, we had been given a little tour of the area, and I found a nice little space where it was fairly dark, where I could just chill by myself and do nothing in particular. Just stare out into the darkness of the woods, or maybe look over the lake, perhaps look up at the stars, as this was one of those rare places where light pollution wasn't so much of a hindering factor here, and you could see up and see actual stars, which was probably the only part of the camp I actually enjoyed. For a few days, I would make my way there and enjoy a little nighttime stroll and me time. After a little while, I'd realize it would be late, my eyelids would start to droop, and it would be a little bit too warm, so I'd make my way back to the room. Hop through the window, close the window, a bit more quieter this time, and get back into bed, and make out like nothing had happened. On the third night, just as I was leaving, I heard some of the group leaders chatting amongst themselves. They were standing outside one of the little cabins, and I had to hide. I got bored of hiding during their conversation, as I think they were flirting and didn't seem to be going anywhere. So I slowly made my way back a different way, intent on finding somewhere else to hide and chill for my nightly stroll. Today, I was feeling particularly salty. I was starting to warm up to camp, just a tad. However, one of the other girls had pushed me by accident, you know, while playing a game of dodgeball. She was on my team. In any case, that had really got me into a bad mood, and I seriously didn't want any human interaction for the rest of the day. As I was walking to towards nowhere in particular, did I hear some rustling behind me. Instantly I froze. I was more worried about getting in trouble than anything else. But if it came to it, whatever, maybe I'd get sent home early. So, even though fear overtook me initially, I started to turn around. But then, there was no one there. I was certain that I had heard the rustling, positive in fact, and I didn't let this dissuade me. So I squinted into the darkness to see if I could make out any shape or figure. Maybe they were going to jump out on me and pretend to scare me. That was pissing me off, that thought alone. And so I waited for a few moments, and when I saw absolutely nothing still, did I convince myself it must have just been an animal that has by this point left the vicinity. My walk continues, and as I'm approaching a different part of the lake, though I slow down near a tree that I saw earlier and sit and relax, just thinking of all the horrible things I'd like to do to the girl that pushed me over in my rage and pent-up anger. I'm sitting there and just quietly imagining these blissful thoughts when I hear the distinct sound of footsteps behind me once more. At this point, I don't turn around. I'm just listening, scared. I wasn't sure if they'd be able to see me because I was sitting right by a very large tree. It should have shielded me from most angles unless you were looking from the lake, of course, where I was clearly visible. I listened, still and motionless in the darkness, waiting to see if someone was going to spring up on me or not. I didn't hear a voice. I didn't hear a call. Just footsteps inching ever closer. I closed my eyes, put my hands in front of them, and pretended like I wasn't there. That's when I heard it. I'm sure she went this way. Nah, mate, I saw her running the other way. It was two men. Two men's voices that I'd never heard. The majority of the people working here, who were part of the church and the group and stuff, were people that I had known, at least peripherally, for a part of my life. Or at least, seen in the last 3 days. This voice, this guy, wasn't part of the group, nor was his friend. I sat there stock still, but now a wave of fear washed over me like one I'd never felt before. Cold sweat was forming down my back, and I felt the hairs on the back of my head and on my arms stand on end, fully alert. I knew I could now run those men, and was thinking that perhaps if I angle myself just right, maybe I could make a running jump for the lake and swim to, well, who knows where. I wasn't thinking straight. I was just terrified, shaking, and I ended up having to put my hand up to my mouth so that they wouldn't hear me. They carried on talking, discussing which way I might have gone. One of them was shining a flashlight. I saw him from the side, approaching the river, and at this point I almost pooped my pants. I was sure he was going to see me. He was going to move his flashlight over to me any second and see my silhouette in the dark, come running over, and then God knows what was going to happen to me. But by some kind of miracle, something happened. The other guy who had gone far to the right shouted that he saw movement, and the guy with the flashlight came running. He decided to run along the beach, and he was running in a straight line, in a trajectory going ahead. The miracle is that he completely didn't see me. There was one moment where his flashlight in his left hand grazed and illuminated my entire body. The fortunate part being that as he ran, it must have been on the backswing of his hand, and I just missed his peripheral vision. I doubt the other guy was looking. When the flashlight left my body and I saw him run for a second or two, did I instantly, slowly skulk out from my hiding spot and as quietly as possible walk back the way to camp. I was feeling very scared. I wanted to talk to one of the counselors, but knew I'd be in trouble for doing what I had just done. So instead, I retreated back into my bed and pretended like it never happened. I knew it was stupid of me to go out at night. I didn't realize those guys were following me at all. I only heard them the one time. I really wonder what could have happened to me had I not heard them and hidden. It would have been much simpler to just not go out at all. In college, a group of friends and I would research haunted/creepy abandoned places and drive out to explore them. We'd often get places from websites, books, hearsay, basically any way we could back then. So it's safe to say that a decent portion of our leads were probably bought or made up. Regardless of that, we explored our fair share of abandoned houses, mental facilities, and haunted areas. Realistically, the biggest danger we ever encountered would have been an angry squatter, but you never know. We did hear a woman screaming for help and what sounded like a gunshot in an abandoned mental facility, but after exploring extensively and finding nothing, someone was just probably messing with us. One time was different though. We'd gotten a lead about a small lake in the middle of some woods where a large stone was used for rituals. We figured it was probably all BS, but it was close to a good diner, and we figured at worst we'd get a good omelette out of the trip. We got to the forest about dusk and parked the car and headed into the woods. There was a faint footpath that you could tell was used with irregularity. We pressed onwards and knew that we were strapped for time, as we didn't bring any flashlights with us, as we planned to get there much earlier in the day than we did. The forest canopy was making it much darker than it actually was, and we ran into the small lake which we were reading about, but didn't see any large stone or something that might be a centerpiece for the rituals we'd read about. The footpath went deeper into the forest, and we decided to follow it for 5 more minutes before turning back. The path slowly began to ascend a small hill, and in the distance we could make out some dark blobs that appeared to be hovering in a slight haze. Again, it was quite dark at this point, so it was hard to make out exactly what we were seeing. As we approached slowly, we realized the haze was actually a tall chain-link fence. That's not the creepy part though. The part that unnerved us was that the dark blobs were every 10 feet on the fence. There was a dead and decaying dog strung up, attached by a dead snake wrapped around the dog's neck, and through the chain links. The fence was padlocked with a chain, but not very tall. We could have jumped it, but it was dark and we didn't have flashlights. It was on the top of a hill, and we weren't able to make out what was inside the fenced-off area, as it turned into a fairly steep decline. We let fear get the better of us and ran all the way back to the car, sitting in silence the entire drive home. I've always meant to go back to that place, even years later now, but I had such a feeling of sickness and dread that I simply can't bring myself to. It's almost an unspoken rule that none of us even bring the place up with one another. I spent the last 10 years as a truck driver, so I've had many stories to share, but I'll share the strangest. Coming out of Washington State Terminal, I was asked to take one of our drivers to Southern California. Not a big deal, I've done it before, but let's meet our friend Gibson. You see, Gibson here seemed very normal and cheerful and a delightful person to keep company with or talking your ear off. However, this all changes once the sun went down. Gibson here turns to me and says, "Hey, can you pull over for a sec? I need to ward off the snake people." This is where my brain doesn't quite process this, and I say, "What?" He repeats the same line, and here is where my spidey senses tell me that if Gibson doesn't ward off his snake people, I'm gonna have a bigger problem than this guy's cookies getting flipped. So I pull over and he gets out. Now, here comes the weird. He does the dance in front of my headlights, and all I can say is he certainly does his snakeboarding dance. Now, here's my dilemma. This guy's obviously a few fries short of a Happy Meal, but I was asked to drive his ass to Southern California. Unfortunately, I think too long about this, and Gibson is sitting again next to me in the passenger seat, as nothing has happened. I drive 1,200 miles without stopping, and Gibson gets to his new truck in Southern California, and I never give another person I don't know a lift. Ever. I work odd hours. Sometimes I'm coming into work at 5 a.m., sometimes I'm leaving at 5 a.m. Most of my shifts are nights, but I have two 12-hour day shifts. Side note, I was 41 at this point, female, rather heavy set, and somewhat plain and dressed in my work uniform. Blue security shirt and navy cargo pants, not exactly the definition of alluring. One morning I was early, so I stopped at the Tim Hortons near my workplace, which is an area that gets a lot of young university students, tech workers, and industrial workers. I went in, ordered, paid, and left. I had been the only person in the lot when I entered the store, and had been the only customer in the store. It was very early, and still dark out. When I came out with my coffee and muffin, I noticed one of the ubiquitous Waterloo taxi cabs parked right next to my old car, a dark grey sedan with the logos of the local taxi company emblazoned on its side and rear. The entire lot was empty, but this twit parked right beside the driver's side of my car. Instantly my nerves were on edge. The man in the car, I'd say, was at least in his 50s, somewhat heavy-set and looked a little foreign. He was staring at me in a way that just screamed creepy, not even looking away when I skewed him with my glare. Most starers will at least turn their gaze away momentarily when caught being creepy, but this guy was just so blatant about his staring he didn't turn away. His stare turned into an outright glare, so I began to get worried that he was more than just a jerk. I said to myself, screw dignity, and got in on the other passenger's side, climbed into the driver's seat from there, which is no easy feat as I'm larger than the average person and with a physical disability. And as soon as I got into the driver's seat, he started his car and began to circle mine very close. Around and around he goes, glaring at me the whole time. I had no idea what his problem was, but then I remember that there had been some pretty major disputes in Kitchener/Waterloo between cabbies and Uber drivers, with some Uber drivers being followed and harassed by cabbies in the recent weeks. It had even made the local news a few times. Maybe the guy thought I was an Uber. That didn't make sense to me though, as I was driving a 17-year-old Subaru that had more rust than paint at that point. No way an Uber would send a car like mine to pick up a customer. As the guy circled me, I thought, maybe I should just leave and head to work even though I'm early. So I put the old beast into drive and waited for the creepy cabbie to drive behind me and just floored it the hell out of there. Of course, he followed. At that point I figured heading into work would be a very bad idea, as my co-worker left. I'd be there alone for 12 hours, and our office, the whole building really, is a giant fishbowl. All windows, zero privacy. It may be swipe card access only, but if someone was really intending to get in there, all he'd have to do was grab a rock and smash one of those big old floor-to-ceiling windows. So I started making random turns. He followed. I zipped through a red light by going through a corner-lot gas station, and he followed. I raced through the lots of empty factories near my workplace, and he followed. By this time, it was growing short on time. The roads were nearly empty, so I couldn't use traffic to get free of him, and I had no choice but to head back towards work. At the time, my building was very big, and had enormous lots around it. I pulled into the entrance furthest from where we security guards parked, and the twit followed. But he only got about 8 meters in before he stopped. I continued in towards the parking and the office door. When I parked, he was still sitting in the lot. I jumped out the car, grabbed my bag, locked the old beast, and ran into the security office. My co-worker Rob asked if I was okay, as I must have looked as freaked out as I felt. I told him the saga, and he put the lot's camera feed into the monitoring screen so we could see the guy in the lot. He was still there. Rob went outside, and as soon as the cabbie saw Rob, he turned around and booked it. I asked Rob if he'd stay an extra half hour or so in case he returned. Rob's bus didn't come for 45 minutes, so he stayed. We'd gotten the cabbie's license plates and his individual ID number since he'd been circling, and I talked about what to do. I had come to the conclusion that I would call the cab company and complain, but when Rob finally left, I hadn't yet. And after 10 minutes, he texted me. He sent a picture of the cab, which he said was parked in the lot of the gas station not even a block away. I called the police. The cab was long gone when the young constable got there 15 minutes later, and I told him what happened and gave him the plate and cabbie IDs. I did call the cab company too. I got a manager who was clueless, unhelpful, and obviously covering for his driver, and he said he had no cabs with that plate and no cabbies with that ID. All delivered in an accent so thick it was nearly unintelligible. Meanwhile, a few days later, the police called back and said they had paid a visit to the cab company's office, where they had delivered a very stern warning to the manager. I never saw that particular cab again, but as cabbies can switch the cars they're driving at ease, and taking their IDs off one car and putting it onto another, I assume the jerk is still out there creeping on single women in parking lots. I don't give a damn about the dispute between cabbies and Ubers. As I see it, the cab companies want business and they need to step up their game and maybe even clean up their cars and bathe their employees and not hire creeps. But still, I wonder if I ended up being mistaken for an Uber driver and that's why he creeped on me and followed me. Anyway, it's not like it was the right thing to do. So creepy cab driver, let's never meet again. This happened to me and my friend when we were 15. I can still remember it clearly, and I didn't dream it, as I wrote it down in my diary. Me and my friend were at Bible camp. Well, when I say Bible camp, it was just a bunch of hipsters singing acoustic songs about Jesus and rock climbing and canoeing for a week. So, you know, nothing overtly religious, really. Like I said, we couldn't sleep. It was midnight and everyone was sent to bed at 10, so we decided to head out the cabin and head to this lake. It was all on the campsite, and we knew the way from orienteering that day. The dirt paths and the whole trail were lit up, and it was actually so beautiful. Anyway, we got to this lake, and we live in the UK, so we don't have to worry about alligators or anything, and went skinny dipping. We got changed and decided to head back. We were walking back when we noticed a tree with the word "done" carved on it. We thought it was something to do with the orienteering trail, so we walked back more into the trees at the side of the path, and then we heard a branch snap above us, and something heavy fell on top of us. It was furry, and I swore it was a large animal, but whatever it was wasn't alive. We bolted before we could even inspect it. I bolted back to our cabin, rechecked our clothes to see if there were any clues as to what it could be, but there was nothing. The next day canoeing was cancelled, and the whole lake was then blocked off. We asked our team leader, and she said that the water needed to be cleaned even though it's a lake. And then we asked the guy that ran the canoeing, and he said that the lifeguard was sick and couldn't guard. I don't know what really happened. I'm convinced that it's a cover-up. "15 years ago, I was in the Air Force and got assigned to provide mobile security to missiles launch facilities located in Wyoming, Colorado, and Nebraska. Riding around in a Humvee for 12 hours a day, 4 days a week in the middle of nowhere is pretty boring. So we would often go into the many abandoned houses located within our patrol area. One was unlike the rest. It was a red brick ranch-style house that looked like it was built in the 70s and was in decent condition on the outside, for it just to be sitting there with no one living in it. I passed the place every day, so I was pretty confident it was abandoned, but I still waited a few months before going in. One night my curiosity got the best of me, so I decided to stop by and check the place out with my team. It was 1 a.m., so we had to use our mag lights to light our way. We never went into places that were locked, so I was excited to see the back door was wide open and the front unlocked. We also looked in the windows before entering to ensure the place was indeed vacant, since we had to carry our weapons in with us. Upon entering, it was a normal abandoned place, stuff scattered everywhere and dusty as hell. We explore around and find out the place has a basement, open the door, and slowly make our way down into the abyss, shining our lights around. And something catches the eye of one of the guys. He points his light at it, freaking out. It's a human figure standing there with their back towards us, wearing a cowboy hat. There's no movement, and then I notice that this person isn't touching the ground, so I point my light up there to see a rope is around their neck and they're hanging by the rafters. We start freaking out, wondering what the hell to do. As we get closer to ensure that it is indeed what we think it is before alerting the authorities, I get within range to knock its hat off with my M4 and meet a burlap sack. Someone thought it would be funny to hang a scarecrow from the rafters, and it did a bloody good job at making us all crap our pants. I was deep in Texas, coming out of Laredo. A Mexican truck starts coming up alongside me. You can spot them easy enough when you know what you're looking for. He gets up next to me, and no one is at the wheel. And then I notice 2 straps are on the wheel, and what I can only assume is the dude was attempting to drive the sleeper with a set of reins. I backed way off, and let them get much further ahead of me. I didn't want to die because of this moron. I saw them. 3 of them in one truck. Later, at the border check on 35, they were in cuffs. I was not surprised. Idiots could have killed lots of people. On another occasion, I was running on Kansas Highway 96, out of Great Bend early one morning. Dawn was just peeking over the horizon back to the east. I rounded the curve out of town, heading west, when I see Bambi and the gang crossing the road. Must have been at least 12 of them. I get up in the middle of the road and lay on the air horn. They stop crossing, but they all start running along both sides of the road in the direction I'm going. I get back on the throttle, and just as I come onto the group, I see 2 of the deer on the north side decide that at that very moment they want to join the group on the south. Reflexes kick in, and I jumped into the oncoming lane to avoid them. I saw one's face clear as day as my fender and door went past him. He didn't hit the front corner of my trailer or my drives, luckily. However, he did hit his head on the side of my trailer. It must have been enough to daze him, as I watched him fall and get hit by my back hopper on the side. He went under my trailer tandems where he exploded. I was over gross weight, and he didn't stand a chance. I pulled over about a mile up the road where it was wide enough to do so, as it was a 2-lane, and went to look over my trailer. I didn't see any marks on my trailer or hopper, nor anything much on the trailer tandems. The only things that were left were a tuft or two of fur and bits of blood on the mud flaps. Rest in peace, Bambi. A few years back, I was without a car and lived in what we consider the downtown area of Pensacola, Florida. Being that I didn't have a car, I frequently Ubered to and from work, and sometimes from bars downtown if it was late, and felt unsafe as a small lesbian walking home. Our town doesn't have a lot of hate crime, but unwelcome confrontation from religious people and just general ignorant people. I never really had a problem with any of my drivers until I met James. James was, I assume, from somewhere else, because his English wasn't as good. Obviously, not a problem. He'd picked me up to take me to and work a few times, but I had a hard time understanding him, so our conversations were short and confusing. One of times, instead of talking, he sang to me the name game. I have a usual conversation, but it rhymes with Bailey, Haley, Kaylee, etc. That happened. It was okay. Kind of funny, but it lasted the 20-minute ride home, so I got weird and didn't know what to say after a while. Fast forward to a few months later. I had drank a few beers at a local dive bar, and it was time for me to walk home. I realized I was probably too drunk to walk, because who the hell where my drunk mind would let me wander off to. So I called an Uber, and it was James. He recognized me and I climbed into the car, and we proceeded to my house. I was only maybe 2 miles from it. Not a bad walk during the day, but at night, nah. Or James decides that instead of going home, he wants to stop by and buy me a Whataburger. Because I need food before I get home, right? Sweet, right? So instead, he drives me to Whataburger. At the point, I'm so cool and happy with what's happening. Well, here comes Whataburger, and he drives straight past it. I'm like, hey, that was it. And he says, yeah, I know, but I forgot my wallet at my house, so we're gonna go there first. That's when I start to sober up and tell him no. Just take me home. Well, he doesn't stop, and first argues that I should be nicer as he's doing me a favor. So I get a little more vocal, and after he says, fine, I'll turn around, and said something in another language that I can only assume was obviously a derogatory term. I felt like I couldn't wait, so I hopped out at a red light and just risked the walk home. That would have just been 2 miles, but is now about 4, because I'm down by the Whataburger. End of story. I did make it home safe, but sadly on my way home, the police stopped and searched me, because I was out late, and they consider this a bad neighborhood. They didn't even want to give me a ride home, because it's such a bad neighborhood. They didn't care about the weird driver, because nothing happened. It was quite creepy to me. I dinged his rating, and I think it was only a month or 2 after I had bought a car. But after that encounter, I had a few friends who were more than willing to help me with work till I got my car right. I don't know if he sees Uber requests and when he saw mine declined it, because I had a lot of dropped Ubers and my rating is still 5 stars. When I was in the 4th grade, I went to a pretty small charter school. I loved it so much. I loved every teacher I had. Our cafeteria was fairly small and we didn't have a real kitchen since the cafeteria doubled as the library. So we just got food shipped in from a caterer. Anyway, I knew almost all the cafeteria people because they were the other teachers and some of the office ladies. We had recess aides that cleaned up the tables and everything. One day there was a new guy there. He was tall. Maybe that's just because I was small. He had glasses, short hair, and seemed pretty built. He was cleaning up tables and weirdly staring at the children. You know, that just horrific feeling you get when you know something is very bad and shouldn't be happening. I had that feeling. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I felt like I was going to throw up. As a child, I was very trusting and never felt this way before. It was only with this man. I ignored it, and just kind of observed him with my friend Abigail at the time. For about 2 weeks this kept happening. I'm going into the lunchroom, eat as fast as I could, and try not to make eye contact with the dude. Also, just some more detail. After we were done eating, we had to clean up our trash and then raise our hand so an aide could tell us if we could leave or not. So one day I'm done with my lunch, my friend and I raise our hands, and I'm praying he's not the one to tell us to go because I hated looking at him, as he always made me feel terrible and on edge. But lo and behold, he looks right in our direction. Usually aides are fairly lenient and would just nod their heads from across the room, but he walks slowly over to us, gets an inch away from the table, pulls out his rag and wipes it. You left a lot of crumbs. We just stared at him because what do we say? It was his job to clean up the crumbs. We pick up our trash, but he stares at us for what felt like forever and he says, "You two are so adorable. You're like sisters with pretty blonde hair and big eyes. Like dolls." I seriously thought I was going to vomit. Then he continued, "Do you girls play with dolls? I'm sure you do. I bet you like dressing them up, huh?" You might be thinking that that was harmless or what he said wasn't that bad, but he had never spoken to a kid before, at least that I had ever seen. He didn't even speak to the other aides. He finally told us we could go and waved after leaving. I told my mom the first time I saw him, but now I ran to my teacher's classroom and told her everything. That I always had a terrible feeling about him and what he said, and Abigail backed me up saying she felt the same way. The very next day I didn't see him and never saw him again after that. That sounds drastic, but I'm glad the school took it seriously because who knows if a kid would have gone missing or hurt by him. I'm only assuming that's what happened, but I was relieved to never have to see him again. About 15 years back, a few friends and I broke into an abandoned pathology. It was pitch black in there, so we left on the first day. Nope. The next day around 10 p.m, we went back, geared up to the brim, headlamps, flashlights, chalk, bolt cutter, and backup batteries. The entrance door was 5 meters tall and made out of thick, and I mean thick, like 10 inches thick, of wood. It was unbelievably heavy to open, and made a real deep cracking sound. It was scary as hell, but whatever, we thought to ourselves. The building was a 4-story building, 2 basements, 1 ground floor and then the first. The main corridor was at least 2 meters in length, with about 8 doors on each side and at least 5 meters wide. The ceiling was about 4 meters high. Same thing on the other floor, except the basement, but we'll get to that shortly. The building was huge, big open rooms, but you felt watched in there. The floor and the ground, the first floor, was made out of concrete, and there was not much to see there, just empty rooms and graffiti. The basement were a different story. The ceilings, walls and floors were tiled, edge to edge. Everything had a white reflective surface. We were scared at this point, but kept on exploring. Remember the chalk we bought? We had it so that we could draw a line on the ground every 2 meters. That way we could quickly find the exit in case of spooky stuff happening. Good luck drawing chalk on tiles. So the first basement was built the same as the first and ground floor. Big rooms, long-ass corridors and high ceilings, but tiled edge to edge. Not much to see there, just some candles and circles made out of roses that were dry, so they had obviously been there for a while. Bit spooky, but no matter, we kept on exploring. Now comes the second basement. This place was pure madness. It was like a maze, no structure at all, as if the architect had a stroke while planning. No room was the same size. The ceiling was maybe 2 meters high and the corridors just wide enough to barely fit 2 people next to each other. Claustrophobic as hell. Some rooms were just squares with doors on each side. There was no reference points, and we had to remember the turns we made and reverse them. 2 left, 1 right, second door left, and so on. Heart pounding and scared crapless. Clear thinking was critical, and every tiny noise there made us hold our breath. I've never felt so helpless before. We made our way through the maze and got pretty good at remembering the place. At one point we all stopped and went silent. There was a huge door with somewhat of a padlock. Should we open it? One of my friends asked. Dunno. What if there are zombies in there? We all laughed, and I pulled out the bolt cutters. It took a few attempts, but we managed to crack the lock open. The room was filled with shelves, and the shelves were filled with files. And the files were probably filled with every person that was ever cut open there. The room was stuffed to the brim with autopsy reports. We packed our stuff and went home. That was enough for us. What gives me chills is that the whole building was empty, but they kept the files? I mean, the building is in use again, still a pathology, but why keep the files there? Even though this story isn't the scariest, I still like to share it from time to time. I really do wonder what they were doing with that still there. And the place in itself was seriously creepy. For the last 7 years, I've been a bull hauler, and I've seen some messed up stuff having to do with cattle. But the scariest thing that's ever happened to me was on a trip to East Texas. I had left out from around Austin and went up just north of Amarillo to kick them off at a feedlot, around a 600-mile trip. I was feeling pretty good, so I decided to turn around and come on back to the cattle company instead of taking my break. I called dispatch and he gave me a sale barn to go pick up and bring back to the company. When I got back, I was pretty worn out, but they told me that a truck had broken down heading to Texarkana and that he needed me to go and get the cattle. I thought, sure, I can do this. I made it about an hour from Texarkana on a little 2-lane Texas back road, talking to a friend of mine on the phone and trying to stay awake. When I fell asleep, I remember hearing my friend yelling my name and waking up to find myself in the grass with a cowboy on a horse right in front of me roping a calf. He roped, dallied off, and turned to face me. Just as I hit him, he disappeared. It was a hallucination. It scared me so bad I was wide awake for the rest of the trip. I used to think being outlaw made me a badass. I'd run 1,500 to 2,000 miles with no sleep and just call it another day of work. I realize now it was me being stupid and putting myself and innocent people in mortal peril. This was around 2017 in Casablanca. My cousins, friends and I were going to a restaurant at night. We were 5 people, so we had to take 2 cabs. My cousin, our friend, and I took the first taxi. We were minors at the time, and it was my first time taking a taxi without an adult. The driver seemed a bit weird at first. His eyes were reddish, and he looked like he was on something. We could just tell by the way he was speaking. He started driving and was making inappropriate comments. I can't remember specifically because it was a while ago, but it certainly made us all uncomfortable. We were at a stoplight and he suddenly locked the doors and said, "I'll choose one of you lot and I'll take her back with me." He then looked at my cousin who was next to him and then looked at us in the back and said, "I'll take her," while pointing at my cousin and smiling. At that point I felt my blood pressure drop. And the thing is, none of us had cell phone credit or data. He just started asking questions and somehow talked about football, and my cousin tried to engage conversation with him to lighten the atmosphere. He started telling us that he was a football coach for girls and started saying stuff about the girls and showing us their pictures. I was looking around and I saw he was taking the right route and we were near the restaurant. We asked him to stop, but he blanked us, so we repeated it and he was like, "Chill girls, I'm gonna stop." And I was joking earlier. We got off and were shocked and relieved at the same time that nothing happened. But now I have this fear of taking a taxi by myself without an adult. In my school district, it has something called Kids Safari. Basically just school-run daycare and summer camps. I was doing a safari at one middle school meant for about 800 people. The safari had maybe 50 kids, 70 at most, so the place was practically empty aside from certain classes and rooms. This place also had a basement, so extra creepy. In our classroom, the boys got together and just told stories. It came down to Bloody Mary and stuff, and I was in second grade, so that was scary. Just after I heard a Bloody Mary story and had to go to the bathroom, which was just down the hall, I asked my friend Nathan to go with me. He said no, but after a bit of convincing, he came with me to the bathroom. I walk in, and one of the lights next to the mirror is off. I just heard Bloody Mary, so I take priority and try to turn it on. It was a tap, and I started tapping the button, but there was nothing. I try again, nothing. So I start spamming the button and finally it turns on. But I'm spamming it and don't have enough time to stop. When I hit it again and bam, I stomp my foot in frustration and my friend, as a joke, tries to turn off the other light. It works. It's now really dark besides the blurry window outside. I'm right next to the door handle, so I'm already on my way out. The moment I touch the handle, everything starts moving really slowly. I get a mega chill down my spine and decided to turn around and see this huge pitch black shadowy figure hunched up against the 7-foot tall ceiling like an adult in a little playhouse. My friend Nathan is closest to it, and he sees it too. I run out my bathroom faster than Usain Bolt. Nathan follows a second later, and I refuse to go to the bathroom there for the rest of the summer. Nathan, however, ran experiments with all the guys to see if they could find it again. They found it every now and again. But one story from one of my other friends who didn't believe me said he was in there when they were doing it, and he didn't really believe them, and when they turned the light off, looked directly behind him, screamed, and they ran. He turned around and saw the thing staring at him. He had to finish peeing as it started walking towards him and he ran out the bathroom, pulling up his pants and almost crying. He said that the thing tried to grab him, but that it missed him at the last second. I was in San Francisco helping out for an online event on one of the beaches a few years ago, and one of the side projects they had going on was clearing this wooded area that was an old bunker hill back before World War I. and I believe was a machine gun post. Needless to say, the main bunker, you only had to slide through the small slit of the structure and it went down to a second level. That was the only way in. So a group of people and I entered and went down what could only be described as a dark hotel corridor with side rooms with a crumbling infrastructure. If this wasn't creepy enough, on the first wall in graffiti was written, "Satan awaits." So we enter, go down to the basement type room, and all the rooms are pretty far gone from age and weathering. When we come upon the room labeled 6, and this room's doorframe was graffitied with a clown-esque design, and the only room with some type of graffiti beside the words upstairs, so it's pitch black, and we all have our camera flashlights to see, and this room has 3 voodoo dolls on the wall, with each of them having a 6 in the middle of the body, with the words on the right saying, "Until the light takes us." This sent everyone into hell, I don't want to be here anymore kind of vibes. So we finished up for the most part and make it down to the end of this winding corridor, where there's a large metal door with a small peephole, and the metal door wouldn't open due to rust. It's just freaking weird. My sister worked about an hour and a half from my mum's, where she was temporarily staying, which was bad because she had a bad habit of falling asleep in cars. So one night that she worked really late, I made her promise to call me, and I'd stay up and talk to her until she got home. One night, late, I'm on the phone with her, and out of nowhere she starts screaming. She finally gets out some semblance of a sentence, telling me there was a girl covered in blood, crawling out of the ditch onto the road. She pulls the car back around and jumps out of the car and runs to her, the phone falling out onto the ground, and I'm still listening. I hear the girl start sobbing and telling her, "Oh God, no, not you, not you, I need help, they're coming back for me." My sister at this point thinks the girl must have some mental issues because of how frantic and disconnected her thoughts are, and because of what she keeps saying, that she needs help, but that she doesn't think my sister could help. In hindsight though, perhaps the girl saw my 5'9", 100-pound sister with her high-pitched voice and thought that whoever it is could easily kill her too. From here, besides the screaming and broken glass, I can only tell it from her side. That's when she sees this truck pulling up and is about to wave them down when the girl goes crazy and starts crawling and pleading with my sister to run. The truck puts on its lights, and 2 very large men jump out and start walking towards them, making clicking, catcalling sounds. And that's when my sister's blood turns to ice. She reaches over, grabs the girl as there's no way in hell she's leaving her, and in a whirlwind manages to force her into the car and jumps in herself before the men reach the car and start smashing her lights. She speeds off, clipping one of them, and is followed by the truck trying to run her off the road for about a half hour. They only pull away when she reaches a hospital. Inside, the girl was in a panic and wouldn't let my sister leave her with the doctors. She keeps saying that she was her best friend. From the doctors, my sister learned that the girl was repeatedly raped and tied up and dragged behind the truck. To add to the creepiness, once my sister got home, she looked at her name tag and remembered that she had left hers at home and borrowed an ex-employee's tag, Stephanie. And yet, despite my sister saying she didn't recall ever not fearing for her life enough to get formalities and exchange names, the girl had called her by her real name. My sister never testified, not because she refused, but because she was never approached or asked to do so. She did give the cops her clothes, and they did process her car. Turns out the police knew who it was. Once she was in protective custody, It came out the girl had dated one of them at some point. It had something to do with drugs. And then thinking she had told someone or something along those lines. Another crazy thing? My sister saw her working not too far from where it happened a few years later. I would assume that my sister would have to testify if they had caught them, but if they hadn't, then I can't explain why she felt safe living in the area we did. It was Sunday night. I was at the airport about to request an Uber when I checked the lift prices. $20 cheaper. So I take Lyft. I requested one and almost cancelled because it was taking a while to find some, but eventually a driver was found. Pretty much as soon as I entered the car and we started driving, he saw where I lived and started talking about murdering people, especially those on bikes in the city I live in. It wasn't just a one line either. He kept going on about it, how he'd get the cold sweats afterwards, and decided he didn't want to feel that, so he tried not to. During this, I'm messaging my boyfriend because the dude is making me feel super weird. I wasn't really trying to converse with him, so all of this was unsolicited information. Then he starts saying how he was going to do haunted houses and makes it seem super lame and like it was over, and then once you leave when you thought you were safe, he'd get you. I ask him, how would you do that? Because I feel like a lot of people are really aware of their surroundings and I would definitely see you coming. He then said, you never know, I might just get you tonight. I laughed and said, I don't think so, as he's literally pulling up to my apartment. When we parked, he just kept talking and I was like, okay, bye, and I had to unlock the car door myself. And when I went to get the luggage from my trunk, he almost took off with it. It was weird too. Both when he picked me up and dropped me off, he'd just stand behind me like a weirdo. It was super uncomfortable. He definitely knows which apartment I live in, and I'm pretty sure Lyft fired him. It's been a few weeks and I haven't seen him or his car hanging around my place even once, but I will continue to keep an eye out for him. I reported this to Lyft and the police department in the city, and threats were made. This is my dad's story. He was a truck driver, or lorry driver as we call them here in England. He used to work down the ports of Dover where we lived. His job would be to pick up one of the lorries as it was arriving from France. He would then drive it all the way to wherever it needed to go. He came back home from work one day, really disgruntled, and refused to tell my mum and I what was going wrong. After a while, and a drink or two, he confessed the following story. He told us that he was driving his usual load. This, for him, meant leaving the house at about 4 a.m. to pick up this delivery. He was driving out, and just as he arrived at one of his usual pickup spots, somewhere just a bit north of London, he had to wait while they emptied out the cargo. I think it was for a supermarket. He told us he'd been here many times before, and that there was a little area for truck drivers to rest at. He stopped talking to the workers and made his way over to have a little bit of a sit down and use the toilet. When he was in the toilet, he heard someone walk in, but when he looked around, as it was still very early in the morning, and he wasn't expecting to see anyone, he was surprised to be met with no one. That was odd, he thought. Could it be a female lorry driver who had gone into the ladies and the echo had just carried or something? He tried to put it out of his mind, and finished going to the loo, washed his hands and walked out. He sat in the waiting area for a while, reading the morning paper. They always took a while, and it gave him a breather before his next load. right as he was reading, he heard footsteps coming out of the toilet. He didn't want to look over, feeling it would be nosy, but knowing that they would have to come through this way and would either sit in the lounge area or go through the front door, he waited to see who it was who appeared. But there was no one. At this point, he started to feel the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. And so he shouted out into the emptiness, "Is anyone here?" But was met with silence. So he walked into the men's and pushed open the two stall doors. He was met with nothing but grotty toilets. There was nowhere to hide here. It was completely vacant. So he shouted into the ladies. Being the gentleman he was, he didn't really want to risk going in. But when he received no reply, and considering the hour it was, he decided to venture in. He pushed open all three stall doors and was met with nothing. It was empty. The first rays of sunlight were just coming in the morning, and he looked around, stricken. He promptly walked out of there and back to where they were unpacking his lorry. He started talking with one of the guys working as a way to distract himself, telling himself he hadn't seen anything. But the terror was written all over his face, and after a little while one of the workers asked what was wrong. He didn't really know what to say. He just said he had a stomachache. But one of the workers caught on quick that there was a bit more that he wasn't saying, and pressed on, saying he looked perfectly fine before he went into the little hut. Then, after a little bit of coaxing, he confessed that he thought he may have heard someone go in, and asked if it was any of them. Then, all of them simultaneously burst out into laughter, and asked if he had heard footsteps. He nodded solemnly, and they confirmed that when they use the restroom in that area while unpacking, they sometimes do hear phantom footsteps, but find no body making them. That's about it as far as the ghost story goes. He did have to make return visits as part of his job, but you can bet your bottom dollar that he never walked into that rest area again. He always asked to use the employee loo inside, and as he knew most of the folk there quite well, they didn't hold it against him. But when he came home that day, he was definitely shaken up, and it took him a good while and a few drinks before he could even go to sleep. This happened to my sister and brother-in-law. They have a hobby called urban exploration, fancy word for trespassing abandoned buildings. But anyway, they were in this old abandoned nursing home in the middle of the night, just doing what they usually do, looking around, taking pictures of the interesting things that time forgot, and experiencing the adventure of breaking a minor law. At one point, one of them found an old, broken, life alert-ish alarm. Not the exact thing, but same concept. They had some magnetic slip or something, and it would go off if one of the old people fell. It was in terrible condition and didn't have any batteries in, but one of their stupid friends picked it up and held onto it for a while. A bit later, they were checking out another area of the home, and there was a heavy steel door closed with a metal hatch in front of the sanitarium section, like the intensive care section or something. And they decided not to go in and to turn around and keep walking, and then heard the loudest blast they've ever heard, and turned around to see the steel door had just bashed open the wrong way. The door was supposed to open inwards, but it had flown open outwards, ripping right through the metal door frame. Needless to say, they got out of there. After they calmed down inside for a while, they decided to go back. They've been doing this for a while, and they don't believe in ghosts. They know there has to be a rational explanation for it, and they're just about to go inside when they hear a loud-ass beeping. They look at their friend who's still holding the powerless, broken alarm, and it's going off like crazy. He throws it to the ground, and the beep starts sounding like screaming, and they get the hell out of there. I was a long-haul truck driver for a few years, and just spending every day out on the road is pretty crazy. You see a lot through the windshield of trucks. A lot of people naturally assume that truckers are male, and for some reason women will flash you a lot. One thing that I did see that sticks out with me are the amount of deceased you see. There was a bad accident one night in Chicago, and it was late, rainy, and the interstate by Wrigley Field, and I could see the flashing lights in the opposite lane. I don't usually rubberneck because I don't want to see other people's misfortune, but this time I did. There was a dead family lying broken on the road, and the first response were pretty much just standing around waiting for the coroner to arrive. I can still see the flashing lights in the rain, and the little dead child lying 30 feet away from its parents. I wish I'd never looked. Perhaps you wish you'd have never heard it. Another time, near Chicago, probably around Gary, I saw a possible drunk driver in a fancy car driving erratically on the interstate. I called the police and gave them the mile marker so that they could try and stop it. I lost sight of the car as it sped off, but a few miles down the road it was flipped over on the other side of the free lane, engulfed in flames. I don't think the driver made it out. There was no one standing beside it. One night in northern Ontario, I was climbing a hill on a single lane, and I was just cresting the top when I see a minivan coming straight at me in my lane, and a long line of cars that they are passing on the other. I have nowhere to go, and I'm not allowed to leave my lane of traffic, even if it means killing you. So I hit the brakes, even managing to lean forward and grab the trailer spike to use all the brakes, knowing two things. I'm about to end someone's life in this minivan, and I'm about to be covered in 1,000 gallons of horse piss that I was hauling in this trailer. Luckily, the stupid minivan was able to get back in the other lane when the other vehicles started hitting their brakes to avoid the incident that was about to happen. Things like that, I remember. Nearly dying in accidents, nearly killing people as they cut you off, not realizing how long it takes for a truck to stop. There are good days to driving, but the bad ones were the reasons I quit. A few years ago, I worked at a grocery store as the manager for the online shopping department. I didn't have a car at the time, so I would take Ubers to work occasionally. The night before this incident, I was at the local brewery with my friends. I took an Uber home and thought the driver was kind of off because of how inquisitive he was, but played it off as him just making small talk. The next morning, I requested an Uber, and it was the same guy. No big deal. It happened all the time here because I lived in such a small town. So I got in the car and this guy remembered everything about me, but again, played it off because I'd literally seen him 12 hours before. I was definitely getting creeped out though. We started chatting again, and he was telling me about how he and his wife are having problems. I thought it was weird as hell, but figured maybe he just wanted to talk about it, because that's my personality. Then he started talking about how they used to ride four-wheelers together, and says how he misses it. I stupidly say, I've always wanted to ride one. Are they fun? Oh, they're great, he says. You should definitely ride some. I actually have a few. I got sketched out and was like, oh, cool. I should see if my boyfriend would be down to ride them too. Finally, we got to work. He gave me an awkwardly long goodbye speech and thanked me for using Uber. And about an hour later, my co-worker and I heard knocking at the door that leads to the pickup space. And it was the Uber driver. I awkwardly opened the door and my co-worker that I call Steve luckily came up behind me because I was like, what the hell? and the driver asked me to exchange numbers with him because he wanted to take me for a ride. Luckily, Steve was like, "Dude, I'm her boyfriend. What the hell, man?" And we closed the door. Steve was an absolute champ. He didn't leave. We had to page my boss, and then he called the cops because he wouldn't go. And he ran off, finally, when the cops showed up. It was super creepy. I contacted Uber, got a refund, and also got a pretty strong confirmation that he no longer worked for them. Yikes. I'm a long-haul truck driver, so I'm no stranger to the States, and I've seen things that I can't explain. But this is by far the weirdest thing that's ever happened to me. I was driving through Arizona heading westbound on I-40. I'd finally hit Flagstaff and get out at a truck stop and handled my business. As I left Flagstaff, I ran by mile marker 185. It's about 10 miles from Flagstaff, Arizona, and as I passed it, there was what seemed to be a person hitchhiking. The only problem was, this guy was huge, about 8 feet tall, and looked straight into the passenger window of my semi. On top of that, it seemed to be as wide as the truck from shoulder to shoulder. I passed the hitchhiker at 70 miles an hour, or so I thought. About half a mile down the road, I saw the exact same person or thing. Once again I passed it, but once again, this kept happening every 20 miles down the road to mile marker 165. I saw it every few miles. After I passed mile marker 165, I didn't see it anymore, so I thought I was done with it. But I was dead wrong. I got down to mile marker 145 and had to take a leak, so I pulled over to the side of the road to handle my business. I was about halfway done when I heard an ear-piercing scream mix between what sounded like a deer and a human. As soon as I heard it, I started looking around, and just outside the halo of my headlights, I saw it. I was never more confused and scared in my life. I tried to figure out what it was when I heard something fly through the air. Suddenly I heard a thump, and sitting 3 feet away from me was a huge rock, roughly the size of a small basketball. It had to have weighed at least 80 pounds, and it landed a mere 3 feet away. I wasted no time trying to hop back into the truck and get away from whatever that thing was. As I passed it, it just stared me down, and I never saw it again. Can someone, please, tell me what I saw? When my class was between the ages of 13 and 14 in June 2018, we were offered the chance to go on an English grade field trip to Washington, D.C., with a handful of other schools. It cost around $1,000 per student, but we were all hyped to get the chance to go. I had 2 very close friends, Haley and Kay. Kay was relatively new to our school and had only gone here for a few years at most, but we were all pretty close already, so we all hurried to sign up together for a room and got accepted. So the day of the trip finally comes around, and it's a 16-hour bus ride. I sit next to Haley in the back, and Kay is on a different bus. When we finally get to the hotel we'll be staying at, it's around midday. The next day, we're all sore. Haley and I get off the bus, grab our key card, and look for Kay. Kay has her nose to her phone and is texting someone, ignoring the rest of the world. I'm pretty loud, so I shout her name, and she finally looks up and smiles at us, wagging her phone in the air. We all get into the elevators together and go up to our room. And we start to get settled in as Kay explains who she was texting. Apparently there was a really cute guy on the trip who I used to be friends with before I moved into this school, she said, and he wants to meet up again, and he invited me to his room. Now, Haley and I looked at each other because as much as we love Kay, she had a knack for messing around with lots of different boys. But she kept begging and pleading as we were still excited to be so far from home acting like adults, and we agreed to go to his room. So the three of us head up a floor towards his room and start walking the long hallway to reach his door. As the three of us stand in front of it, we're all whispering to each other like, "Knock, no you knock." Finally I knock, and it opens. First knock. First red flag. The guy that Kay was so desperate to meet opens his door shirtless and steps back and motions for us to follow him in, glaring at Haley and I, but I could be mistaken. Haley looks at Kay and shakes her head, walking away. I go to follow Haley, telling Kay good luck, but she grabs my arm and begs me not to leave her. I was a pretty shy kid and not used to shirtless, attractive boys, but I sigh and tell her I'll stay. She pokes me and tells me to go in, and we go back and forth again until I finally walk in. I sit down on the floor in front of the shirtless guy's bed and look up to what they're watching on TV, which was SpongeBob. There's another guy in the room on the other bed. He's not important though. Kay nervously walks in behind me and sits next to me on the floor, and it's about 5 awkward minutes of no one talking as we watch SpongeBob. Suddenly the shirtless guy on the bed reaches down and grabs Kay, pulling her up to the bed towards him and tickling her. She screams and tries to play it off as laughter, but I rock it off the floor and turn to leave. I'm almost out of her reach when she grabs my arm very lightly and digs her nails in. I'll never forget the look in her eye as she just said, "Don't leave me." But like the coward I am, I yanked her arm out and apologized. The creepy dude had his face by her neck, and his hands are on her upper sides as he smiles up at me, and I hear him tell Kay, "Let her leave." I run out the room and go down the hall trying to call Haley and get her to come up so we can go in together and get Kay out. I'm shaking as I go down the elevator to the ground floor to check her at the Starbucks, then go upstairs to check our room. I'm on the verge of tears as I leave our room and go check the ground floor again when I see her come out the stairwell with a cup of some Starbucks drink in her hand, and she starts to call me. I shout out her name and she looks up at me and sees me. I must have looked a bit crazy because she rushes over and asks what's wrong. I explain everything to her as we head towards the elevator to grab Kay. When I finish, she angrily asks me why I left her alone with that guy, and tell her I needed help. I was too afraid to say anything, and we run down the hall to the creep's room, and Haley bangs on the door. We pass the 2 other boys that we ran down in the hallway, and the boys stop beside us and ask why we're knocking on their door. We explained that we left our friend inside and we were there to get her back. When those guys light up and say, "There's a girl in there?" like a couple of idiots, and then the creepy boy opens the door up with his shirt on, and the boys run past him to look around their room. The creep looks at them, we stare at him as the other kids stare at us, and then they go, "There's no girl in here." Haley and I book it back to the elevator and try calling Kay going back to our room. When we open the door to our room, Kay is sitting on the bed looking at the floor with her hands folded on her lap. Haley and I hug her and ask if she's alright, and she nods and tells us she left shortly after. I apologize repeatedly and she said that it was okay, that she probably would have done the same thing, but I still felt awful because I'm much bigger and could have done something to stop it. For the rest of that trip, we called the kid Tickle Me Elmo because of what he did to Kay. And after the trip, I told my dad what happened, and he agreed with me that we shouldn't have left her alone. If you girls had been any older, something very bad would have happened. When you go to college, don't ever leave a girl alone with a guy. I wish back that I had the courage to say something, but I was an ugly, zip-faced kid with self-image issues. Just know that if I ever run into the guy again, I won't back down. And this time I'll say what I want to do. To give some context, I'm a 16-year-old male and go to Ephraim, Utah every summer to do drum corps, and it usually lasts all summer. If you're not familiar with drum corps, it's just basically professional marching band. We stayed on a college campus and had 3 days every Sunday to get to know the people and just relax before we had to go rehearse the next week. This took place last summer. This particular Sunday night, my section wanted to go stargazing, since there's really nothing else to do in middle of nowhere, Utah. People recommended we go to the softball field that was a little walk away from where we were staying. We all agreed to go there that night and planned on being there around 9:30 p.m. However, me and someone else from my room volunteered to go and get snacks, since we were planning on being there for a few hours. We started walking to the nearest gas station to get some chips and soda for the rest of the group. When about halfway there, we noticed a strange white truck with its lights on parked right next to the sidewalk. It was too dark to see the driver, but we thought nothing of it, even if it was a bit unusual at this hour. We got the chips and sodas and began to head to the softball field. It was quite a walk from the gas station, so we were prepared to be walking for at least 15 minutes. When we were not even halfway there, we saw the same truck again, only this time it was parked on the opposite side of the street, with its lights still on. It was about then when we started to get a little suspicious. It appeared to be following us, so we began to pick up the pace. We walked for a while and turned around to look to see if it was still following us, but it was nowhere in sight. Then we started laughing to ourselves for being so worried when it was probably nothing. But when we were about halfway there, just as we were passing a bell tower right next to a parking lot, it was then we saw the headlights again. But this time he was driving pretty fast towards the sidewalk. Me and my friend didn't really know what to do, so we kind of just stared at it until it actually drove onto the sidewalk and nearly hit the bell tower. At this point we started sprinting, but the truck wasn't far behind. We took a shortcut to another side of the sidewalk, one we were sure the truck couldn't get to. We ran the rest of the way back to the softball field without even looking back. When we got there, we told the other people in our section, and they told the staff the next morning, but nothing was really done about it, since the only proof of the truck on the sidewalk were the tire marks. I still don't know what he wanted from us, or if I was just overreacting, but either way it still kind of spooked me. I didn't see that white truck ever again, and I hope I never have to. Some friends and I used to explore abandoned places for fun. We stopped because, hey, well, we could have died. Here are some of our more notable experiences. We explored an abandoned warship once. There was this old shoreliner that was used in World War II that was later used as a vacation boat or something. Some old idiot bought it and shored it up in shallow waters, and it was basically left to rot. We had to trek through hillbilly country, and trespassers will be shot signs everywhere. We were definitely trespassing. One time I thought I could walk right up to it and climb in. The river was really high and we had to wade out to it. That messed with me because we were definitely risking being bitten by snakes or stepping on rust, and the ship itself was rather boring. On another occasion, there was a giant old radio tower / office building. There's a building in my city, all brick, probably 10 stories high, in the ghetto, and it was used over the years for all kinds of stuff, but it was originally, and mainly, a building for radio. This thing was gigantic, kind of heavily secured, but we found an open window about a story up and shimmied in off a pipe. Once we got there, it was definitely a feeling of something being off. It was dark, of course, but it was also unsettling. It smelled wet. The story we found ourselves on was what used to be a chapel of sorts. There were a few pews and an old confessional. Church stuff is scary as hell to find in a dark place with a cell phone flashlight. And we continued to look around, and we climbed some stairs into the next story, and were relieved when there was more light. But something was really wrong. It was very clean for an abandoned complex, like no rubble on the floor, no garbage. Weird. And then we kept looking around, when all of a sudden, an alarm sounded extremely loud. Right when one of us saw a bobcat, the machine, not the animal, and the alarm went off. Easily the scariest moment of my life, and we took off with a singular pack mentality running for the stairs. But they were bricked in. Afterwards, we all agreed, in our collective panic, that we had the thought that hobos had walled us in quickly and quietly, as hobos do. We were wrong. We just went down the wrong stairs, and ended up leaping from the window we came through and getting away with a few bruises. Damn, what a rush. The next story was from a place that was most certainly haunted. Or, ghosts aren't real, but there was definitely a body crammed somewhere within this place. Allow me to elaborate. So, in a different terrible part of town, there was this abandoned apartment complex that used to be a school. Brick with wrought iron interior gates, wrought iron on the windows, etc. This place used to be a pretty secure building. Did I mention it was huge? Anyway, we shimmy into another window. A woman screams that she was going to call the cops from her double wide right beside this place. So that set the scene to be a little nervous. We get in and instantly I'm like, what is this feeling? Dust was everywhere, odds and ends from everyday life. It was like we entered into someone's old apartment. We carry on. The atmosphere wasn't comforting, but I ignored it. Like I said before, the hallways / stairwells have these massive wrought iron gates and tile floors. Nice plaster molding, hardwood pillars. I doubt it was very hoity-toity. But I'm also surprised these nice, older world details survive from the crackhead looters in the area. The hallways were very vast, and we all find gunshot holes here and there. Same people would be like, screw that. But when you're exploring, you're like, yay, danger. So we explore a few apartments and I go off on my own for a bit, into a closed apartment because I have absolutely no brain cells. And the first thing I notice are photos, Polaroids, all over the floor. And then it hit me that this place seemed to have been pretty hastily evacuated. And I don't know how to rationally describe it, but I feel like if I held up a ghost sensor thing to these photos, it would have exploded. We left not long after, fearing trailer lady would make good on her promise to call the police, and I'm glad we did. I was in the mall, Crossgates. It was a pretty large place, and I was 13 at the time, being 30 now, so it was a while ago. My mum was cashing out in Lord & Taylor, and me being such a cool person wanted to hang in the car. My mum, after some coaxing, begrudgingly gave me the key to sit in the car and listen to music. There were only a couple of people ahead of her in line. It was early evening, and the sunlight was still creeping between the clouds, and the sky was warm. It was summer. I walked to the car, but I felt off. I could hear a car behind me, but it was a parking lot, so that was useful. When I see this big truck, they pulled up in front of me. The back was open, which I thought was odd. It was a huge U-Haul, and it was empty. A man was in the back of the U-Haul. He asked me to show them, the three men, where the Hooters was. Now, anyone familiar with this mall at the time knows perfectly well you can see Hooters from the lot I'm sitting at. Their bright orange sign says it all. I pointed in the direction, mentioning it that you could see it from here. He asked me to get in the trunk, a big, empty hole in the back, so that I could show them where it was. I was kind of stuck. You see, there were three of them. Why the hell would I get in the back of a box truck? You couldn't even see the driver. I was speechless. All my fears rushed back to me from my childhood. Out of nowhere, I could hear keys being jingled from behind me. Some man, an older man, probably in his 50s, came running up to me, pretended he was my father, and told them to get off and that I was his daughter. They drove away pretty quickly, not really listening to what he said. I still wonder what would have happened if he hadn't have helped me out. To preface this, I love to drive. Long hour drives to nowhere with no destination in mind. Just me, my music, and the road ahead of me. Living in Nebraska, I'd often take back roads on lonely highways cutting through the countryside to small towns and eventually cities. And I'd like to usually take these drives at night, since there was much less traffic to worry about. I've done it since I've had my license for the past 4 or 5 years, and I've never once had any sort of issue, nor run into any trouble of any sort. This was, until a few nights ago. For reference, I'm a relatively small 22-year-old female, and as I've stated before, I often take these drives completely and utterly alone. They're a good way to clear my head when I'm stressed, upset, or overwhelmed, or for me to get a plan together or sort out personal issues. I've also done these long and lonely drives to get away from the toxicity of my household when I used to live with my parents as a means of coping with their alcoholism. Though now that I've moved out and I'm in a much better place mentally, I don't really have the urge to get in my car and just drive anymore. However, on the night this event took place, I was feeling pretty overwhelmed, stressed and anxious, with a cluster of personal issues I'd rather not get into. I felt restless and irritable around my boyfriend and couldn't focus on anything else, and decided I needed a drive to clear my head. My boyfriend was understanding and told me to be careful and to not be gone for too terribly long, since it was getting pretty late. I agreed, gave him a kiss goodbye, and left. I drove around our city for about 30 minutes, but I was still feeling on edge about everything transpiring in my personal life, so I decided to drive further north, down those familiar, dark, winding one-lane highways. I kept the car at a steady 65 miles per hour, taking the turns at a slower pace in case a deer jumped out around the bend, and was just admiring the vast empty darkness of the snow-capped fields and barren trees. It was honestly a bit creepy being all alone with no cars in sight, in seemingly the middle of nowhere. The few houses I'd seen were now miles back, the road lightless, and the dead cornfields withered away and were covered in snow. It was like something out of a horror movie, and I half expected to see a ghost pop up my rearview mirror or see someone clamber out from the patches of trees dotting the horizon. The only light came from my headlight, and even then, I still strained to see through the inky darkness of the night. By now it was just after 11, and I told myself that once I made the familiar roundabout that would either take you to a small town or back towards the city, I would head back towards the city and home. The roundabout was still 15 to 25 minutes away, but other than my imagination picturing the worst, I wasn't really at all concerned. I mean, I was by myself, but I didn't have any other motorists to worry about, right? Wrong. As I round another bend, I notice a vehicle with its hazards flashing maybe a quarter of a mile or something away from me. It was some sort of sedan, dark-colored, and was angled to where only part of it was on the shoulder, while the rest was jutted out on the road, like they had to pull over in a hurry but didn't quite manage to do it. The driver's side door was flung wide open, and as I slowed my vehicle down and angled it towards the opposite side of the road to pass, I could make out what looked like maybe blood on the inside of the open door. I didn't see anyone on the road or in the car, and I was the only motorist in sight. The cell phone reception was spotty at best in this part of the country, but more often than not, you couldn't get reception no matter how hard you prayed, which was definitely the case when I took a glance at my phone to see if I had any service. So a lone female on the road at night, pulling up near a vacant vehicle that looks like someone had been attacked on or inside of, with no cell service. Now I'm no dummy. I've watched countless episodes of investigation, discovery, and criminal minds, and read far too many true crime books to know that this had bad and danger written all over it. But there was a still small part of me that was worried something terrible had happened to whomever was in that vehicle, and I thought I needed to help. These roads didn't get a lot of traffic late at night, and temperatures were well below freezing. If someone were hurt or in trouble, there was no one and nothing else to help them but me. Still, I erred on the side of caution. I was still driving my car, though a bit more slowly, and as I approached the vehicle, I rolled down my passenger window a bit, shut off the music and called out, "Hey? Anyone there? You okay?" I didn't hear a response. I worried they were passed out somewhere, but I wasn't about to get out and look for them. I told myself I'd call out one last time, and if I didn't hear anything I would leave, and the moment there was reception I'd call it in, and if I did hear someone, well then I'd get to that bridge when I came to it. So I shouted again, "Hey, what happened? Are you okay?" There was silence for a beat. Then I heard rustling in the shadows of the trees, followed by a gruff voice saying, "Yeah?" I was relieved at first. I was about to say something in response, or possibly even stop my car and get out, when I noticed three things simultaneously. As I inched my way past the front of the sedan, I noticed there was no damage to the hood or anywhere else on the vehicle, which I found to be strange considering the blood on the inside of the door. In my rearview mirror, I caught a glance of someone coming out from behind the sedan, and they were making their way towards my car fast. The person did not have any blood on them, nor appeared injured in any way, wearing a mask, not like a face mask for COVID or ski mask or anything normal. One of those masks you could see being used in the Purge movies, and they were holding something in their hand. I don't know what it was, I didn't get a good enough look, but from its length and shape, my best guess would be a tire iron or a crowbar. I don't even need to say that I slammed on the gas at that very moment and drove like a bat out of hell, my heart thundering in my chest and my entire body shaking. My window was still rolled down in my haste, and the music was still shut off, so I could very clearly hear someone, definitely a man, shouting at me, though I had no clue what they were saying. I just knew I had to get out of there immediately. I stole one last look in my rearview mirror as I drove away. mostly to see if they were getting in their sedan to follow chase or if they had stopped. The man with the weapon was still standing in the middle of the road watching me, and right before I looked away from the mirror, I saw a second man emerge from the trees that had been rustling earlier, also wearing one of those creepy masks and no trace of blood on him. I probably broke every law for speeding that night, but wanted to get away from those men as quickly as possible. As soon as I made it to the roundabout, I turned towards town, parked in a Walmart parking lot that thankfully still had cars in it from who I assumed were workers closing up shop, and proceeded to have a full-on meltdown. When I could pull myself together, I called one of my friends who was a police officer to tell him what happened, and asked what I should do. He was concerned for me after asking if I was okay, where I was, and if they followed. He told me since it was out of the city limits, he couldn't do much on his end, but he could get in contact with the local police sheriff in that jurisdiction to take my statement and check it out. I agreed and thanked him, and while I waited for police to show up, I called my boyfriend. Through my hysterical sobs and panic, I managed to tell him what happened, not even 10 minutes or so ago. He was, as you can imagine, super freaked for my safety, and wanted me to either come home immediately or drive down himself to take me home. I told him the police were on their way to take my statement, so I couldn't leave and that I was okay, but I stayed on the phone with him until I saw the familiar police cruiser pulling into the lot. I gave the police my statement, and they assured me they would go back to the spot I told them the sedan had been to take a look, and they would try and catch the guys who did it. Though with no cameras and no description of the men, I wasn't sure they'd be able to. I didn't even get the license plate number, though at the time of my panic, the thought never came to me until the police were asking if I got it. All they had to go off of was guys in a dark-colored sedan wearing masks. After I gave my statement, I went home and stayed curled up close to my boyfriend the whole night, listening to every sound the house made in fear it would be those guys arriving any minute to finish whatever they had started. Since the incident, I haven't heard back from police about whether or not they had any leads. I'm not sure they ever will. I'm just thankful I'm still here, and that I didn't stop to get out my car, because I'm not sure what would have happened if I did. I still have so many questions that have no answers. What were they doing? Why? What was the blood on the inside of their car? Was it a ruse to get more attention? Or was it really blood? Did they hurt someone? What would have happened to me if I'd have stopped my car? Needless to say, I won't be going on any late night drives to anywhere for a while, and I hope I never cross paths with those freaks again. This next story is one of my personal favorites to share, since everything turned out alright, but I still get chills thinking about how many different ways the night could have gone wrong. Allow me to elaborate. A few years ago, my friend Jane and I took a trip to Portland, Oregon. We're both from the south side of Chicago, and Jane was feeling pretty jaded with the city. She was convinced everything was better on the West Coast, including the people. So we flew out to Portland and rented a car, which we called Veronica. The day before we were supposed to fly back home, we took Veronica and drove up to Aberdeen, Washington, to see Kurt Cobain's childhood home. After that, we drove down the coast, sightseeing along the way. We visited Astoria, Oregon to see their house from the Goonies, and ended the day at Cannon Beach to check out Haystack Rock. All in all, it was a pretty nice day. Once it started to get dark, we decided to head back to our hotel, which is just under 2 hours away. I knew that I needed gas, so I told Jane I would stop at the first gas station I saw. Cannon Beach is a small resort-type town. There are a lot of little shops and restaurants, but I didn't see any gas stations. Being from the city, I'm used to seeing two on every corner, so I wasn't really worried. I expected to find one soon. I am completely unfamiliar with the area, so I just keep following the GPS's instructions while talking to Jane. Next thing I know, we're not in any type of town. We're on a dark, winding road surrounded by trees. At this point, I am getting a little worried. I pull over to the side of the road and use the GPS to search for the nearest gas station. It tells me there's one about a mile down the road. Awesome. I'll get some gas and we'll be set. So I'm driving, and Veronica tells us that we arrived at our destination. I pull into a completely dark and empty gas station. We're still surrounded by woods and darkness, and as far as I can tell, there's nothing around for miles. According to Veronica, we have about 10 miles worth of gas, and the nearest gas station from here is 30 miles away. Jane and I are sitting there trying to figure out what to do, when another car pulls in. I keep going about my business and don't really pay attention to the other car. I just assume they need gas too. When out of the corner of my eye, I see someone gesturing to me. After some hesitation, I crack the window to see what they want. There's a middle-aged man and his wife in the car. He starts asking us all kinds of questions. Need to fill up? Coming from the beach? Driving back to Portland? I keep my answers polite but short. Then he tells me he actually owns the gas station we were at, but that it doesn't make enough money to keep it open that late. He tells us he knows of a chevron about 3 miles away and gives us directions for it. He gave us his number and says to give him a call in case we don't make it to Chevron. His name was apparently Sam the mechanic, and wanted to know if we needed him to rescue us. We thanked him profusely and headed out. Jane is going on about how nice it was, and that would never happen in Chicago. I agreed. It was very nice, and says, "A lot of weirdos out here tonight." Jane and I look at each other and let out a small laugh. Told you. I turn back to the kid and ask him what he means. He tells me this story how his brother owes some drug dealer a ton of money, and how he's hiding somewhere nearby. He's planning on kicking the crap out of him once he gets off his shift. I can tell Jane is getting uncomfortable with the building weirdness of the night, so I give the kid a decent tip, wish him luck, and start driving again. At one point during our conversation, Jane calls Sam the mechanic man and leaves him a voicemail. She tells him we made it to the gas station and how much we appreciate his help. I thought the call was unnecessary, but it is what it is. A few minutes later, we're on the highway, and about 10 minutes from our hotel, Jane's phone rings. It's Sam. Again, she thanks him profusely. He asks her where from and when we're flying home. He tells her his name is Sam Glasty, and he wrote a book called Wrongly Accused, and that we should read it while on our plane ride home. This piqued my interest. Jane, you have to look the book up to see what it's about. She Googles it, and then she makes a face that looks like she's about to puke. What is it? He was accused of being the Green River Killer. Immediately, she starts freaking out, because he now has her number. Back at the hotel, we do more digging. Apparently, a victim of the Green River serial killer picked Sam out of a lineup. However, the real killer was caught and convicted based on DNA evidence. But around the same time in the 70s, Sam was convicted and served time for abducting and assaulting a young woman in the area we were in. The book he wrote was all about that. We ended up stuck in Portland for 2 more days due to a snowstorm in Chicago. It was a weird, tension-filled 2 days. Considering the circumstances and weirdness of the night, things could have gone horribly wrong. I'm glad all I got out of that night was a story of a near miss. This story took place in the 70s. My father's friend is a forest ranger who also happens to be a competitive pistol shooter, like who can hit the most targets the fastest sort of thing. He is driving with his wife, playing car poker with a local car club. Basically, the group comes up with objectives, generally places to drive to, and you're awarded a card for accomplishing them. The goal, of course, is to get the best hand. All of these objectives are completed over the weekend, and all done individually. That is, the drivers go their own way. This is not a caravan. So he and his wife were driving their convertible, I think it's a Triumph, along the back roads of western Washington near Concrete. They come around a bend in the road, and a large pickup dragging a good-sized log comes tearing out perpendicular to the road, so that the log is now blocking their path. Putting the car in reverse and looking behind them, the husband sees another truck do the same thing, effectively boxing him and his wife in. Each pickup bed is occupied by 3 or 4 rednecks, one of whom has a shotgun. One of the rednecks, clearly the leader, jumps down from the bed and walks over to the car. It being a nice day, the windows are already down. The redneck leader leans into the car and leers at the man's wife. It's a fine-looking woman you got there. The husband's pulse races. Being a competitive shooter and a forest ranger, technically a peace offering, the husband carries a pistol under the seat of his car. While the leader of the redneck bandits walks up to the car, the husband slowly reaches under his seat and pulled up his revolver and concealed it under his legs. As soon as he heard the leader imply that these men were going to rape his wife, he grabbed the leader by the collar and pulled the pistol to his forehead. "You'll have to move that log in front of us or I'm going to blow your head off." The leader went silent for a moment, the calculations running in his head. The leader said, "You can't get all of us." "Sure, but you'll be dead." Self-preservation rolling the day, the leader motioned for the front log to be moved. The husband drove slowly forward, keeping hold of the leader's collar until he was clear of the obstacle. He made it past and got the hell out of there.